Prologue, Wimbledon, early 70s. Chuck won the point, won the game. He sat down at courtside, picked up a towel, mopped, then reached into his bag for a dry shirt. Well, Dan, young Chuck Chandler's come a long way in this tournament. I'll say he has, Bud. Coming into Wimbledon, this boy was ranked number 100 in the world. He started strong, then clawed his way up through the seeds, defeating 2 former champions along the way, and now he stands at the threshold of a whole new career. Would you say that, Cynthia? I certainly would, Dan. This young man has the talent to beat anybody when he's playing this well. And now Chuck Chandler has the reigning champion tied at 2 sets all and down 5 games to 4. Chuck strode out to the baseline to a swelling roar of approval from the crowd. He positioned himself at the baseline and slammed an ace down the center line. 15 love, the umpire said over the loudspeaker. Chuck walked to the opposite side of the court, positioned himself, and sent another serve straight down the center line at 125 miles an hour. The crowd went nuts. 30 love, the umpire announced. Chuck took his place and slammed his first serve into his opponent's forehand corner for a third ace. The crowd went berserk. 40 love, the umpire announced. Chuck served with all his power. The ball slapped against the tape at the top of the net and fell back into his court. A groan from the crowd. Chuck served again. The ball struck the net again. A noise of pure misery from the crowd. 40-15, the umpire announced. Chuck felt a swell of anger at himself. He walked to the other side of the court and served again, straight into the net. A sound of shock from the crowd. Chuck took a deep breath and served again without delay. The ball struck the tape and died. 40-30, the umpire announced. Quiet, please, ladies and gentlemen. That's 2 wasted match points, and he's only got 1 left. Can Chuck do it, Dan? We're about to find out, Bud. I'll do this one by the numbers, Chuck thought. Racket held for a flat, hard serve, straight-arm toss, mighty swing. The ball hit the tape and bounced off the court. The crowd gasped. Chuck stood, sweat pouring down his face into his eyes. There could be no second serve in this position. He had to pull just 1 more ace out of the hat. He walked to courtside, picked up a towel, wiped his face, and returned to the baseline. Please, God. He set himself up, taking his time, tossed the ball, and put his last match point unerringly into the net. The crowd was absolutely silent. Deuce, the umpire said. 24 minutes later in the dressing room, Chuck knelt before the porcelain throne and puked his guts out. He had lost the next 2 points. He had lost the next 2 games. He had lost the Wimbledon championship. He had lost the best opportunity a boy ever had to become a hero. Bud, what happened out there on the center court? There can only be one explanation, Dan. Just one. Chuck choked. Chuck woke in a sweat, his heart pounding as hard as it had 20-odd years before. The Wimbledon dream was back. The brass clock on the bulkhead said 9:20, and he was starting his new job at 10. At 9:45, freshly shaved and dressed in clean whites, he stepped ashore at Key West Bight, the racket in his hand and the sunglasses perched on top of his blond head. His boat was a 32-foot twin-screw motor yacht that had been custom-built in the 50s at an old-line yard in Maine. She was named Choke. He preferred to make the joke himself before somebody else brought it up, as somebody always did. He got into his Porsche Speedster and drove the length of the island to the Old Island Racket Club, 3 courts and a tiny pro shop owned by the big hotel across the street. He walked in at the stroke of 10. Merkel Connor looked up from his computer and peered at Chuck. "Oh, hi," he said. "That's right, you're starting today." He seemed to have forgotten. "That's right, Merk," Chuck said. "Sit down a minute, Chuck," Merk said. Chuck took a seat. Here it came. Let me give you the lay of the land, Merck said. This is not Palm Beach, Chuck predicted. This is not Palm Beach, Merck began. We're not fancy, but we're busy. If you work hard at developing a clientele here, you can knock down $75,000 a year, maybe more. Stay away from the broads. You're going to have to be careful with the female talent, Merck continued. Basically, I don't give a damn who you screw, as long as it's not in the hotel and it doesn't, reverberate. You got my drift? I get your drift, Merck. There won't be any problems. Good, because I got problems enough, what with running 2 programs, this one and the one in Santa Fe. In April, I head west, and it's up to you and Victor to run this place. I'm Victor, a voice behind Chuck said. Chuck turned. Hi, I'm Chuck Chandler. Victor Brennan, the man said. He was mid-40s, bushy mustache, tousled hair, permanent grin. Welcome to paradise. Thanks. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, Victor, lay off and listen, Mark said. Chuck, I'm going to divide the work roughly between you and Victor. You get the better players, the hot shots and the comers. Victor does the daily clinic, which is mostly hotel guests, plus the housewives, the kids, and the duffers. He's temperamentally suited to that kind of teaching. I am, Victor confirmed. I'm the sweetest guy in the world, and I can teach anybody to play tennis. I'm going to charge more for you, Chuck, because you have a reputation, Merck said. We have folks who will gladly pay just to hit with you. Victor will give you the rundown on them. That I will, Victor said. Come on out to the courts, and I'll show you the lay of the land. Victor led him out of the pro shop, past the ball machine, and past the cart of practice balls. There's a 17-year-old boy named Bill Tubbs who you might be able to do a lot with, Victor said. He's got a hell of a lot of talent, and he's very strong. Has dreams of becoming a touring pro. You'll have to deal with his old man, the beer distributor, who thinks the kid is Pete Sampras. Okay, Chuck said. Who else? Over there, Victor said. Chuck turned to see 2 people getting out of a shiny new Mercedes S-Class sedan. The man was 60-ish, tall, slim, and looked to be in good shape. He had thick, snow-white hair brushed straight back and a deep tan. Getting out of the other side of the car was the most beautiful woman Chuck had seen since he'd left the pro tour, and that was a long time ago. She was tall, 5'8" or 9, had high breasts, long legs, a tiny waist, dark hair in a ponytail, and a tan nearly as deep as her companion's. She was 30 years younger than he. Wow, Chuck said. Wow, indeed, Victor replied. They turned up last month, and they're both pretty good. Names are Harry and Claire Karras. Married? Chuck asked. That's the bad news. What else do you know about them? The couple opened the main gate to the courts and walked in. Come on, I'll introduce you, Victor said. Chuck watched the woman walking toward him, and he was suddenly aware that her husband was watching him, watching her. Harry and Claire, Victor said. This is Chuck Chandler, our new head pro. Chuck shook Harry's hand first. It was soft but strong. How are you, Harry? Good, Harry replied. Claire? Chuck said, turning to her. Hello, Chuck, Claire said. We heard you were coming. Her hand lingered in his. Glad to be here, Chuck said, trying to tear himself away from her large green eyes. I hear you folks play good tennis. Why don't you join us for dinner this evening, Chuck? We'll officially welcome you to Key West. Victor, you too? Both pros accepted. Good. 8 o'clock at Louis' backyard. Thanks, Harry, Chuck said. He glanced at Claire. I'll look forward to it. There was a tiny curl to Claire's red lip. Chuck took it for a smile. Chuck found Louis' backyard on the second try. Louis' was a good-sized Victorian place that looked more like somebody's home than a restaurant. Victor waved at him from the bar, and Chuck slid onto an adjacent bar stool. Chuck watched as a boatload of people left a good-sized motor yacht anchored offshore and made their way to Louis aboard a Boston whaler. The skipper tied up the boat, and a party of 6 scrambled ashore. Half an hour passed before the Karrases turned up, and the whole restaurant turned to watch their entrance, or rather, Claire's entrance. She came down the stairs in a white strapless dress that nature held up, and for a brief moment not a word was spoken within sight of her. Chuck stood up and watched her walk toward the bar. "Hello, Harry," he said, shaking the husband's hand first. "And Claire?" "Sorry we're late," Harry said, "but our table's ready, so let's sit down and have a drink there." The talk turned to tennis as the menus arrived, and they stayed on that subject through 2 courses, until Harry changed it. "You do any diving, Chuck?" Harry asked. "I do. I live on my boat over at Key West Bight. I'll be happy to take you out sometime." "We'll take you," Harry said. "I'd love to." At that moment a gust of wind struck, so sharp and so sudden it knocked over a wine glass, and a split second later a roar filled the air. Suddenly everyone in the restaurant was standing, looking in the same direction. Chuck followed their gaze. A column of yellow fire rose into the sky, and debris was falling into the water in a large circle. The motor yacht Chuck had noticed earlier had now become a flaming hulk. "Holy shit," Victor murmured. "Gas," Harry said. "Gotta be gas." "Gas and gasoline," Chuck replied. "Diesel wouldn't blow like that." "Do you suppose anyone was hurt?" Claire asked. "I don't think so," Chuck replied. "We saw a large party leave the boat and come ashore." Tommy Scully was on his feet with the rest of the diners, gawking at the explosion. Then he got hold of himself, reached for his pocket cell phone, and dialed 911. "I knew it," Rose said. "I knew you'd do something to fuck up this dinner, but I'll admit I hadn't expected anything quite so elaborate." "Rosie, shut up and eat your dessert," Tommy said. "Key West Police Department," a woman's voice said. "This is Detective Scully. A boat has exploded 150 yards off the east end of the island, and there may be fatalities. I want you to—" "Who did you say this is?" the woman asked. "Detective Thomas Scully of the Key West Police Department," he replied. "I don't know any detective named Scully." "I'm new, okay? Now you get hold of the Coast Guard and tell them to scramble a cutter and to make sure there's a medic on board." "Are you sure?" "Do it and think about it later." He raised a hand. "Waiter!" he yelled. "Check." 5 minutes later, Tommy had collared the young man who had skippered the Boston whaler to the restaurant and was on his way to the scene of the explosion, along with a very unhappy accountant from Atlanta. "I just bought the thing," the accountant said. "This is our first cruise." They reached the site of the explosion, and Tommy looked around. "Jesus H. Christ," he said. "There's nothing left." All he could see were small pieces of flotsam, some of them still on fire. A siren sounded, and from around a point appeared a large vessel wearing a lot of lights. "Here comes the Coast Guard," Tommy said. "I got to ask both of you some questions before they get here. Anybody aboard the boat?" "No," the accountant said. "We all came ashore for dinner at Louis." "Thank God for small favors," Tommy breathed. It was past midnight when Tommy got to the hotel room he and his wife were living in until they found a place. He sneaked in, trying not to wake her. "Well, I guess you don't have to worry about it being too dull down here," Rose said. "What happened?" "Looks like an accidental gas explosion that ignited the fuel tanks. Nobody aboard, thank God." "You like it here already, don't you?" "I guess we did the right thing," Tommy replied. He had retired from the New York Police Department after 20 years, taken his pension, and headed south. Rose liked Florida, and it had taken him less than a month to find the Key West job. He was 42, and he had just started building time on a second pension. When he was 62, they'd be free as birds. "Let's talk about that when we found a place to live," she said. "Then I'll know if we did the right thing." Chuck had a light first week at the Old Island Racket Club. His only regulars were Harry and Claire Karras. They never missed, and they always came together. Until Saturday. Claire showed up at 11 a.m., alone. "Morning, Claire," Chuck said. "Where's Harry?" "In Miami, on business," she replied. "What do you want to do today?" She looked at him for a moment. "Let's work on my serve," she said finally. "I'm too erratic." Chuck nodded. "I've noticed, but you've never seemed interested in any instruction." "I'm interested," she said. He worked with her for a full hour, and by the end, she had improved noticeably. "Thanks," she said. "I enjoyed that." "So did I," he said. She put down her racket and mopped her face with a towel. "Come to dinner tonight," she said without preamble. Chuck took in a quick breath. "Love to," he replied, trying to sound casual. "See you at 7, she said, then gave him the address. "Don't dress up." "I won't." The house was only a block from Key West Bight. The door was open, but he rang the bell anyway. "Come on in," she called from somewhere. Chuck opened the screen door and entered the house. "Up here," she called from upstairs. He climbed the stairs and emerged into a large living room with the kitchen to his left, separated by a bar. Claire was rummaging in the refrigerator. She turned toward him and there was a bottle of Veuve Clicquot in her hands. "Some champagne?" "Sure." He set his gift of wine on the bar. Chuck accepted a flute of champagne. They clinked glasses. "New friends," she said. "I'll drink to that." She came from behind the bar and took a stool next to his. She was wearing a short, sheer dress that buttoned down the front. 2 patch pockets covered her breasts, and he could clearly see her panties through the material. "You look very beautiful tonight." She laughed, showing even white teeth. "It's my job." "Your job?" "It's how I earn my keep." She shrugged. "It's how most women earn their keep if they don't have children and don't keep house." She poured them both more champagne. "You get me drunk feeding me champagne on an empty stomach," he said. She uncrossed her legs. "Don't I have to get you drunk to fuck you?" she asked. Chuck set down his glass and tried to control his breathing. "Nope," he said. Afterwards, she got up and went to the bar. "That was very quick," she said. "Next time you're going to have to make it last longer to make me happy." "Making you happy is why I'm here." "I hope so," she replied. "Do you feel guilty? About Harry, I mean?" "Not really." "You shouldn't, you know. Harry looks great, but he's not a healthy man. He had bypass surgery a year and a half ago, but he still drinks a lot and eats a lot of fatty foods. He'll drop dead one day." "Are you ready for that?" "Yes, but in the meantime there's practically no sex. He had prostate surgery last year." "You think Harry knows what we're doing?" "It wouldn't surprise me." "How often does he go away on business?" 2 or 3 times a month, usually." "That's not often enough." "We'll manage." She turned and looked at him seriously. "How old are you, Chuck?" 44, he replied. She breathed. "It's time you were thinking about your future, your security." She got up and, still naked, began to prepare dinner. Chuck woke late on Sunday morning and had to rush to make it to work on time. As he stepped ashore, a sailing yacht of about 30 feet was backing into the space on Choke's port side. "Can you take our lines, please?" a young woman called from the yacht's stern. She was young, in her late 20s probably, not tall, and voluptuously constructed, which was easy to see because she was wearing only the tiniest of bikinis, and barely that. "Sure," Chuck called back and caught the length of rope just as it was about to strike him in the face. On the foredeck, a man was paying out anchor rope. "Thanks," the girl said. "I'm Meg Haley. Chuck Chandler, Meg. Nice to meet you. I guess I'm your next-door neighbor." Her male companion walked through the cockpit and stepped ashore. "Hi, I'm Dan Haley," he said. "I'm Chuck Chandler, and this is my boat," he said, nodding at Choke. "Where you in from?" "Fort Myers was our last port," Dan said. "We'll be here for the rest of the winter, I think." "Let me know if you need any local knowledge," Chuck said. "I've only been here for a few days myself, but I'll tell you whatever I can." "Thanks," Meg replied. "You can start by pointing me at a grocery store." "The waterfront market is just along the way. I'm headed that way. I'll show you if you like." "Be back in half an hour," she said to Dan and kissed him on the cheek. She fell in beside Chuck and they walked toward the market. "So you're new here too?" she asked. "Yeah, I came down from Palm Beach just recently." "You going to play some tennis?" she asked, looking at his clothes. "I teach tennis," he replied, "even on Sundays." "Sounds like a tough life," she said, smiling. "I bear up." He returned her smile. "Well, here we are," he said, pointing at the market entrance. "Thanks," she said. "See you later." He watched her pick her way barefoot over the gravel and enter the store. "Thank God she's married," he thought. "Otherwise she'd be real trouble." Not that her being married would slow him down. It was just that if she were single, it would be harder to break it off when it was over. Later at the tennis club, a teenage boy was hitting with Victor, and he was stopped in his tracks by the boy's grace of movement. He let himself into the court. "Morning, Chuck," Victor said. "This is Billy Tubbs. He's interested in working with you, I think." Chuck shook hands with the boy, whose face was nearly blank of expression. He was at least 6'2", 190 pounds. He seemed to be looking Chuck over very carefully. "And this is Billy's dad, Norman Tubbs," Victor said. "How you doing?" Norman said. "Glad to meet you, Norman." Chuck watched the boy hit ground strokes for a few minutes, making a mental note or two. "Norman, do you mind if Billy and I talk for a few minutes, just the two of us?" "I'll be the one who makes the decision about who coaches him," Norman said. "You can talk to me." "The boy has some problems that he and I need to discuss before I decide whether to take him on," Chuck said, not unkindly. "When he and I are finished, then you and I can talk." Norman looked at him for a moment, then got up and left the court with Victor. "Have a seat, Billy. Let's talk." "I'm okay," Billy said. Bad sign. "Okay, you stand. What kind of a player do you think you are? No need to be modest." "I'm a damn good player," Billy replied. "How'd you do in competition your junior year?" "I was runner-up in the high school championship." "Well," Chuck said, "I guess that makes you a pretty good high school player." He waited for that to sink in. "I want to join the pro tour as soon as I graduate." Chuck kept himself from laughing. "Well, let me tell you what I saw this morning. I saw a pretty good high school player who's got some nice ground strokes and who's a pretty good volleyer and who has a decent second serve." "Second serve?" Billy said, astounded. "I didn't even hit any second serves." "You mean that was your first serve?" Chuck asked. The boy glowered at him, but said nothing. "Let me tell you what I see," Chuck said. "You're in lousy shape. You've been drinking too much of your old man's beer. If you sign on with me, there'll be no more of that. I'll run your ass off. However, if you'll shed some of your weight and your arrogance, and if you play the way I tell you to, I can probably get you a tennis scholarship at a good university. And if you keep learning while you're in college, then you might make a pretty good touring pro." The boy stared at the ground for a moment. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I'll do it your way for a while." "You'll do it my way every day for as long as I coach you, kid, or you'll do it for somebody else," Chuck said. "You better understand that up front. I don't need your daddy's money to get along, and I sure as hell don't need any lip from a pretty good high school player. Do we have an understanding?" "Yeah," the boy said. "Try 'yes, sir,'" Chuck said. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now go tell your dad I'd like to talk to him." "I'll tell you the truth, Norman. If he listens to me and plays the way I tell him to, by the time he's a sophomore, the agents will be all over him." "That's kind of what I thought," Tubbs said. "Okay, then," Chuck said, standing and offering his hand. "Send him over here and we'll get started." Chuck played a set with the boy and beat him 6-love, ran him all over the court, humiliated him. When they were done, he sat him down on a bench. "That's what it's like to play against a pro," he said. "Even a 44-year-old pro. Are you beginning to get the picture?" Billy nodded, sucking in wind. "Yes, sir," he said. Tommy Scully took a seat across the desk from his boss, the chief of police. "Welcome to Key West, Tommy," the chief said. "Thank you, sir," Tommy replied on his best behavior. "I'm going to tell you something you already know, Tommy. Key West ain't New York." "You're right, I knew that," Tommy replied. "For instance, I know you spent your last dozen years on the NYPD in homicide, that homicide's your forte." "That's right, sir." "Well, last year, we had a 400% increase in homicides in Key West." 400%? "That's right. Of course, the year before, we only had 1, so when we had 4 last year, it looked pretty big. You get the hang of the paperwork in a hurry, standard stuff, probably not much different from what you had in New York. Oh, and I have a partner for you." He looked up through the glass door of his office. "And here he comes now." Tommy turned to see what he took to be a kid of about 17, longish hair and pimples, walk into the office. "Tommy, this is Darrell Haynes," the chief said. "Darrell, this is the detective I told you about." The two shook hands. "How you doing, Darrell?" Tommy asked, appalled. "Okay," Darrell replied, then looked at his feet. "This is Darrell's first day as a detective," the chief said. "He's had 2 years on the street." On whose side, Tommy thought. "Oh, yeah, good. I reckon you can teach Darrell a lot about investigation," the chief said. "And Darrell can show you a few things about Key West. He grew up here." "Grew up?" Tommy thought. "When?" "Darrell, why don't you start by giving Tommy a tour?" They stopped for some lunch at McDonald's and ate in the car. As they were finishing their burgers, Tommy looked up to see the white-haired man he'd seen at Louis' on the night of the exploding yacht. "There," Tommy said. "What do you make of that guy?" Darrell watched as the man got into a large Mercedes and drove away. "I don't know. Rich, I guess." "You're a wizard, Darrell," Tommy said. "Here, run his tags and let's see who he is." Darrell called in the tag number. "Name is Harry Karras," the radio operator conveyed, "of an address on Day Street, Old Town." "Harry Karras," Tommy said aloud to himself. "I give you 2-1, Darrell, that's not his real name." "Why do you think that?" Darrell asked. "Let's test out your local knowledge, Darrell. Do you know somebody who would run a credit report on our conspicuous consumer?" Darrell thought for a moment. "Yeah," he said. The two policemen sat in a tiny office in a corner of a used car lot on Roosevelt. They watched as the fax machine slowly spat out its paper. "Weird," he said. "What's weird?" Darrell asked. 3 credit bureaus never heard of a Harry Karras." Darrell looked at Tommy. Tommy beamed. Sunday was busy, and there was a shortage of advanced players, so Chuck had to take a pair of Victor's duffers. "I'm Tommy," the man said, sticking out his hand. "This is Rosie." They were both on the short side and firmly built. "Good to meet you, Tommy." "Rosie," Chuck said. "How much tennis have you played?" "She's played maybe twice, and I've never walked on a court before," Tommy replied. Swell, Chuck thought. Rank beginners. The lesson went more smoothly than Chuck would have believed, however. Tommy was a pretty good natural athlete, and Rosie's concentration made up for her lack of talent. By the end of their hour, Chuck had them both hitting a decent forehand and backhand. Maybe it was easier to teach a raw beginner with some talent than to try and correct a more experienced player's years of bad habits. They were just walking off the court when Harry and Claire Karras drove up in the Mercedes. Chuck felt a pang of disappointment. Harry was supposed to be in Miami. "Ain't that something?" Tommy asked. "What?" Chuck replied. "That lady," Tommy said. Rosie had gone into the pro shop. "Ain't she something?" "Not bad," Chuck said. "Not bad," Tommy said. "You must run with a different crowd than me." "I guess she is at that," Chuck agreed. "Who are those people?" "Harry Karras and his wife, Claire." "She don't look like nobody's wife to me," Tommy said. Chuck laughed. "I guess not." "Who is Karras? What does he do?" "Retired businessman, I think," Chuck replied. "I played with him a couple of times, and I've given her a lesson or two, but I don't really know that much about them." "Uh-huh," Tommy said, and Chuck somehow thought the man didn't believe him. Tommy sat in the unmarked patrol car, his head resting against the back of the seat, and half dozed. Darrell glanced over at him. "You look a little bushed." "You're not going to believe this, Darrell, but I played tennis yesterday." "You don't seem like the type to me," Darrell said. "I don't look like the type to me either," Tommy agreed. Tommy looked at his wife in the car seat next to him. "Tell me again how this invitation happened," he said. "I already told you, Tommy," she replied, sounding exasperated. "No, I mean exactly how it came up. It's important, sweets." "Okay," she said. "I was in the pro shop looking at some new tennis shoes, and this Claire Karras struck up a conversation. She's nice, I guess, and I kind of liked her. Later, as she and her husband were leaving the court, she came over and asked if you and I would like to do some snorkeling on Monday and have lunch on their boat." "How did she know that Monday was my day off?" "I don't know that she did. She just asked. Why is all this so important?" "I don't think the guy is who he says he is. I've done some checking on him, and things just don't add up. By the way, is anybody else coming?" "She didn't say. I assumed just the four of us." "Weird," Tommy said. "If Karras is somebody else, you'd think he'd want to stay as far away as possible from a cop." "So maybe he's who he says he is." The Karrases were waiting for them aboard Fugitive, and so were the two tennis pros, Chuck and Victor. Rosie started to introduce Tommy to Karras, but Karras threw up a hand. "It's Tommy, isn't it?" "That's right," Tommy replied. "And I'm Harry," he said. "Well, shall we get underway?" He ran up the steps to the bridge, cranked the engines, and expertly backed the 60-footer out of her berth, then headed for the entrance to Key West Bight. Claire produced Bloody Marys for everybody, and they took seats on the broad afterdeck and sipped their drinks, chatting idly and enjoying the winter sun. They'd traveled perhaps 10 miles when Tommy noticed smoke coming out of a ventilator. He stood up and shouted, "Hey, Harry, you got a problem down here." Harry stopped the engines and looked over the railing at Tommy. "What is it?" he asked. "Looks like smoke coming from down below," Tommy said. Harry came down to the deck, looking worried. "I'm afraid I don't know much about the mechanics of this vessel," he said. Chuck spoke up. "Looks like exhaust to me, Harry. I'd be glad to take a look at it. Shut down your engines and let her drift for a few minutes and turn on your blower. We'll give it a chance to clear out down there." Harry followed Chuck's instructions, and after a few minutes, Chuck went below deck. "Gosh, I hope it isn't serious," Claire said. "I've been looking forward to getting out on the water." "Chuck seems to know what he's doing," Tommy said. Shortly, Chuck came back on deck. "Harry, nothing to worry about. Just your exhaust tubing for the starboard engine came loose from the overboard vent. I put it back on and put a second hose clip on real tight. Harry placed a hand on his heart. Thanks so much, Chuck. I thought I'd burned up an engine or something. He turned back to the controls, started the engines, and they were immediately underway again. They laid anchor off Sand Key on the reef and finished their second round of Bloody Marys. Anybody for a dive? Harry asked. Sure, Chuck said. I brought my gear, and I see you have a compressor down below. I was working right next to it. I sure do. I hate lugging tanks back and forth from the dive shop. It's much more convenient to be able to fill them myself aboard. Tommy, do you and Rosie dive? Nope, Tommy said. We'll stick to snorkeling. Equipment was produced. The Karrases, Chuck, and Victor got into their diving gear and set off along the reef. Tommy and Rosie donned masks and snorkeled lazily along in their wake. Driving home later, Tommy said, Those two have a hell of a lot to hide. And believe me, before I'm done, I'm going to know it all. Claire Karras looked across at her companion. They were sitting naked in the back seat of the Mercedes in a grove of trees on Stock Island near the huge lump of garbage the locals call Mount Trashmore, and they had just made love. We're going to have to cool it for a while, she said. What's the problem? He asked. This cop, Tommy Scully, has been too much in evidence the past week or so. On our diving trip, for instance. It was Harry's idea to invite him and his wife. Maybe you just liked them. It's not like Harry to like cops, let alone socialize with them. Are you fucking Chandler, too? He asked. Baby, she spat. What a shitty thing to say to me. You are, aren't you? If I am, it's for us, sweetheart, she cooed. I'll try to remember, he said. She pushed him off her and retrieved a towel from the front seat. So we're going to cool it? Promise me, baby. I can't afford another attempt, failed or successful, while this cop is hanging around. When it happens suddenly without warning, and it has to be final. No screw-ups next time. Yeah, the screwing will have to be between you and me. That evening, Chuck saw Meg Haley dressed in her inadequate bikini, watering the potted plants in the catamaran's cockpit next door. Hi, she said, catching sight of him. Hi yourself, he replied. Buy you a drink? Chuck mixed them a drink, then set up the little stainless steel grill which hung outboard in a special bracket and got a charcoal fire going. Haven't seen much of you, Meg said, sipping her drink. She had changed from her bikini to bleached cutoffs and a chambray shirt, unbuttoned and tied in a knot under her breasts. Work, 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 Chuck said. Teaching tennis is work? She snorted. That's what everybody thinks, Chuck replied. If your work is somebody else's sport, then it's not work. Actually, I put in 5 or 6 hours of instruction a day in the hot sun, on my feet, every week of my life. Poor baby. What's your idea of recreation? Chuck looked her up and down. You haven't had enough to drink for me to tell you. She laughed heartily and handed him her glass. I guess I better get to work if I want to find out. You're accustomed to gawkers, I imagine. She blushed. My share, I guess. If you spend most of your life in a bikini. Half in a bikini. Are you objecting? Not in the least. He leaned over and kissed Meg on the neck. You keep doing that, and we'll never get to the steaks, she said. Much later, Chuck rolled over and reached for the ice cream, then fed her a spoonful. She said. Macadamia brittle, my favorite. I knew it would be, he said. How could you know that? He shrugged. You just look like a macadamia brittle kind of woman to me. He liked this girl. Thank God she's married, he thought. I could get into serious trouble here. Somehow I have the feeling I'm not the first guest to share this berth with you. Let's not talk numbers. Would the numbers be embarrassing? Embarrassingly small, he said. She snuggled up next to him and ran a hand down his belly. Me too, she said. I should hope so, he replied. Married woman like yourself. Me, married? She asked. Not likely. Alarm bells rang. But what about Dan? What about him? You have the same last name. Our mother wanted it that way. He's your brother since birth. Oh, shit, he whispered to himself. What did you say? I said, and shipmates, too. Oh. Does it somehow bother you that I'm not married? Oh, bother isn't exactly the word, he said. Terrify is the word, he thought. Chuck sent Meg back to her own boat after breakfast, and he was happy that Dan wasn't around at the time. He had no particular desire to face her brother this morning. In the late afternoon, Harry and Claire showed up to play tennis. There was something different about Harry, though. He was still affable enough, but edgier. Then he surprised Chuck. You think you're all finished choking in your life? He asked Chuck. Beg pardon? You choked at Wimbledon. Have you put that behind you? Is your head on straight these days? I think so. I think not. Chuck glanced at Claire. She looked vaguely uncomfortable. Why do you say that, Harry? I think you're a born loser, Chuck. When the pressure's on, you fold. What evidence do you have of that? Chuck asked, surprised at the direction the conversation was taking. My own intuition, Harry said. I think I know a loser when I see one. Claire looked at the ground. Harry, knock it off. You're being rude. Harry ignored her. Tell you what, he said. I'll give you a chance to prove me wrong. I'll play you 3 games for $1,000. Claire spoke up. $1,000? 3 games, Harry repeated. Any more than that and your comparative youth would give you too great an advantage. I serve 2, you serve 1. That'll even us up. Come on, Harry, I don't want your money, Chuck said. Victor had heard all this, and now he spoke up. What's the matter, Chuck? Couldn't you use $1,000? He could, Chuck reflected. He had about $1,200 in the bank, but he wanted some new equipment for the boat, and $1,000 would help a lot. Harry, I'm the pro here, and I've got 20 years on you. I don't think it would be fair. Fair doesn't come into it, Harry said. Go on, Chuck, Victor said. Take the man's money. Chuck shrugged. Okay, he said. I'll take your money. They warmed up for a few minutes, then Harry served. Chuck planned a bit of a hustle. He'd lose the first game, win his serve, then let the last game run close before he took it away. Losing the first game was easy, since Harry seemed to be playing above his usual game. It was the second game that Chuck got his first surprise. He served a hard one to the outside. To his astonishment, Harry ran to the ball and snapped a forehand straight down the line. It was in by 6 inches. Love 15. Chuck took aim at the inside corner on his next serve, but the ball went closer than he had planned. Harry took it on the rise and put an inside-out shot into the opposite corner. That was a shot he hadn't shown Chuck before. Love 30. Get a grip, Chuck thought, and he did. He came back to deuce, and with 1 ace and another hot serve, won the game. They were tied 1-1. Harry's serve. Suddenly, Chuck found himself playing someone new. Harry opened the game with a clean ace, then followed with another. On his third serve, he surprised Chuck by following his serve to the net and putting away a volley. Before Chuck knew what had happened, he was down 40 love. Chuck won 1 point back, then another, and then they were at deuce. Harry mopped his brow with a towel, then put an ace down the inside. Advantage Harry. "Now we'll see what you're made of, Chuck," Harry called across the net. "I think you'll choke. Want to double the bet?" Chuck shook his head. He was 1 point away from decimating his bank account. "Serve, Harry." The ball came high across the net, and Chuck thought it would go out. Too late, he realized that topspin would keep it in. He ran forward as the ball bounced. The topspin carried it high, and Chuck wasn't ready for that. The ball struck him in the chest. "That's match, I believe," Harry called from across the net. Chuck's ears were burning. He had been had. Harry had hustled him like a pro. He managed a smile as he shook Harry's hand at the net. "I'll get my checkbook," he said. Harry put an arm around the younger man's shoulders. "Nonsense. I wasn't serious. I was just making a point about performing under pressure. Believe me, I've had a lot more experience at that than you have." "Harry, I insist on paying you," Chuck said. "I won't accept it. If you write the check, I won't cash it. I'll tell you what, you come diving with us on Monday and you can buy us dinner afterward. We'll call it even." "Okay, Harry," Chuck said. "Tell me, where'd you pick up that goofy topspin serve?" "I invented it," Harry said, getting his gear together. "See you Monday about 11? "Fine. And thanks for the tennis lesson." Harry laughed loudly as he and Claire left the court. She glanced over her shoulder and gave Chuck some sort of look. He wasn't sure what it meant. "Well, Guy, what happened?" Victor asked, a look of mock sadness on his walrus face. "Oh, shut up, Victor," Chuck said pleasantly. On Monday morning, Chuck woke up not wanting to go diving with the Karrases. He rolled over and snuggled up to Meg. "I have to get up," he said. "Why?" she asked sleepily. "I have to go diving with some people." "Can I go? I like diving. I'm certified in everything." "Not this trip, I'm afraid. I wish I hadn't accepted, but this is kind of a kiss-off of these people for me." "Who are they?" "Tennis clients. People I don't really want a social relationship with anymore." "Why have you been socializing with them?" "Habit, I guess. When I first came to Key West, they invited me out, were nice to me." "And now you don't want to be nice to them?" "I've just come to feel uncomfortable around them." "I'll fix you some dinner this evening, then." "Oh, that's another thing. I have to buy them dinner." "Oh?" "I lost a bet. A guy beat me at tennis, so I have to buy. That's all there is to it." "What's the name of these people?" "Karras." She pushed him back and looked at him. "Now I'm getting the picture." "What picture?" "Chuck, I've seen the Karras woman. What's going on there?" "Nothing. Not anymore." "You were screwing her?" "At one time. It was just a fling." "I'll bet it was." She got out of the bunk and began to get dressed. "Listen, Meg, this was before you. You're the reason I'm breaking it off. What the hell gives you the right to be pissed off about another woman who happened before you came along?" "I may not have the right," she said, "but I'm pissed off anyway." She stalked out of the cabin and off the boat. This is the end of Side 1. "Late night?" Claire asked as he climbed aboard Fugitive. "Don't ask," Chuck replied. "Where are the others?" "It's just a threesome today," she replied. "Where's Harry?" "Getting some beer from the marina shop. We've probably got time for a quick one." He looked at her, amazed. "Only joking," she said, smiling. "I would if I could, though." He knew she would. "That's very flattering, Claire." "I fucking well hope so," she said sweetly. "Here comes Harry." Chuck took the paper bag from his host and waited while he climbed aboard. "Where are we headed today, Harry?" "A wreck I know," Harry replied, starting the engines. "A few miles west of here, just outside the reef." "Won't there be a crowd? The tourist dive boats know all the wrecks." "The dive boats don't know about this one. I found it myself. A coaster of about 100 feet. Looks like it's been there for at least 10 years. "Sounds good," Chuck said. They had been cruising at 30 knots for half an hour when smoke began to drift up from below, just as it had on their last trip. "Harry!" Chuck yelled over the engine noise. He drew a finger across his throat. Harry cut the engines. "Not again," he moaned. "I'll see to it," Chuck called out. "Turn on your blower." He gave the ventilator 5 minutes to work, then went down to the engine room. An inspection revealed a repeat of their last problem. An exhaust hose had come off the overboard vent pipe. The 2 hose clips he had put in place on that occasion were still there, but loose. Chuck reconnected the hose, tightened the clamp, and safety wired them for insurance. The whole business took less than 10 minutes. As he was leaving the engine room, he noticed Harry's air compressor again, bolted to the deck beside the engine, the exhaust of which he had just repaired. Funny place for a compressor, he thought. You'd think he'd want it on deck, where it'd be a hell of a lot more convenient for refilling dive tanks. "Everything okay?" Harry called out as Chuck surfaced. "Yep. The hose clips had worked loose again. I wired them this time. You shouldn't have another problem." Harry restarted the engines and they were on their way again. He was steering from the flying bridge, so Chuck and Claire had the afterdeck to themselves. Claire opened them a beer. "Sorry about that tennis bet the other day," she said. "I don't know what got into Harry." "Sure you do," Chuck replied. "He knows. Honestly, I don't think Harry knows. Really, I don't." "We're going to have to let it go, Claire." "What do you mean?" "We're going to have to stop seeing each other." "Seeing each other? Is that what you call it? I'd have said we were screwing each other's socks off." "Okay, then we're going to have to stop screwing each other's socks off." He managed to smile. "So you're dumping me? Claire, come on, this is dangerous." "You don't want me then?" "Claire, we had some good times, but that's all they were. Don't come on like a woman scorned, okay?" Claire was quiet for a while. "All right," she said finally. "All right what?" "We'll stop seeing each other. After all, Harry could fall off the perch at any time. Maybe we'll have another chance." "Maybe," Chuck said, but he was thinking, never. The engine slowed. "Here we are," Harry called. "Chuck, will you get on the anchor? Claire, will you get out our gear?" As Chuck let the anchor chain out, he tried to feel relief, but he was still uncomfortable about being on this boat with Harry and Claire Karras. He wanted the day to be over. Later, he would wish it had never begun. Chuck handed down the 3 tanks, each a different color, to Harry, who was standing on the teak diving platform inches above the water. Harry was all ready to go in his swimsuit and a t-shirt. He slung the red tank onto his back and buckled it in place. "Aren't you wearing a life jacket, Harry?" Chuck asked. "Never do," Harry replied. "Too much gear." Chuck thought he had worn a jacket the last time he dived, but he wasn't sure. He got his own inflatable jacket out of his bag and slipped into it. Claire emerged from the master cabin wearing a white one-piece swimsuit that might have been sprayed on. Chuck sighed, and he was giving this up. "You wearing a compass?" Harry called up. "Yep." Harry pointed to the north. "You see the reef?" "Yep." "The wreck is in about 60 feet of water outside the reef, bearing about 030 from here, maybe 100 yards. Chuck looked at the compass on his wrist. "I'm off," Harry called. "Harry, wait up," Chuck called. "Let's all go together." But Harry had dropped into the water. A trail of bubbles followed him toward the wreck. Chuck climbed down to the dive platform. "Give you a hand with your tank?" he called up to Claire. "You go ahead. Harry should have someone with him." "Okay. Does it matter which tank?" "The blue one's the guest tank, the yellow one's mine." Chuck got his flippers on, then strapped his harness onto the tank and slung it onto his back. "You're wearing a life jacket, aren't you?" "Sure. Go ahead after Harry. I'm right behind you." Chuck pulled on his mask, bit the mouthpiece, and tested his regulator. Claire was coming down the ladder. He gave her a wave and dropped into the water. He was descending a little too quickly, so he blew a little air into his vest to neutralize his buoyancy. That done, he continued his descent, checking his compass and depth meter on opposite wrists as he went. He felt a little queasy. Too much wine with dinner last night, maybe. He reckoned he'd covered 100 yards, but the wreck was still not in sight. At 50 feet, he stopped his descent and blew more air into his vest. The bottom was in sight, and for the first time he had a fixed reference to let him know that a current was running, a knot, maybe two. A moment later, something large came hazily into view, and a moment after that it was clearer. The ship lay upright on the sandy bottom. Chuck swam for the wreck. Then he stopped. A little wave of nausea swept over him. Jesus, he thought, maybe he shouldn't have come diving with a hangover. Only it wasn't much of a hangover, not enough to make him sick. Chuck belched a couple of times. There was an awful taste in his mouth. He took a couple of extra deep breaths and continued on. Then he saw Harry. Harry was on deck, and he wasn't wearing his tank, which lay on the ship's deck. He still had his mask on, though, and it was all that was keeping him in one place. His body flowed out parallel to the ship's deck, his arms waving idly in the current. Chuck accelerated toward him. As he approached, he saw through Harry's mask that his eyes were open, staring. No bubbles were rising from him. There was blood in his mask. Chuck reached the unconscious Harry. His own heart was racing, his lungs pumping air out rapidly. He felt very sick. He decided to forget the tank since Harry wasn't breathing anyway. He yanked the mask off the inert man, grabbed him by the wrist, and started for the surface. He had only gone a few feet when suddenly he vomited. He spat out his mouthpiece and heaved his guts out, expelling the air in his lungs. He tried to put the mouthpiece back in for some air, but he vomited again. Involuntarily, he tried to breathe and sucked salt water into his lungs. Panicked now, he let go of Harry and yanked the CO2 cord on his life jacket. The jacket inflated immediately, and he shot toward the surface, kicking wildly to increase his ascent, terrified every foot of the way. What seemed minutes later, he broke the surface, gasping for air, choking on seawater and vomit, still unable to breathe. Then he retched again, bringing up bile and salt water, and that cleared his breathing passage. He bobbed on the surface, gulping down great lungfuls of air, trying not to vomit again. He saw a fugitive at anchor, maybe 150 yards away, up current. Then he saw Claire's yellow tank. She was clinging to the diving platform. He was still nauseated. He began swimming weakly toward the yacht, but he made little progress. He unbuckled his harness and sloughed off the tank and his weights. Then he was able to make better progress. As he neared the yacht, he could see that Claire had vomited too. He swam up to her and grabbed hold of the dive platform. "Claire, are you all right?" he gasped. "Sick," she said weakly. He undid her harness and got the tank off her, letting it fall into the water. He heaved himself onto the diving platform, then got hold of Claire and dragged her up beside him. The two of them lay there for a couple of minutes, taking deep breaths. Claire rolled over onto her stomach and vomited again. "Oh, God," she moaned. "What's wrong with me?" He knew he had to get up the ladder and to the radio, but he couldn't manage it just yet. He lay there and tried to gather strength. "Harry," she said. "Where's Harry?" "Gone," Chuck replied, then started slowly up the ladder. Chuck felt remarkably well now, considering how ill he had felt 20 minutes before. "Here they come," he said, looking east. The Coast Guard cutter was steaming toward them at great speed, and he was glad to see it. "Are you both all right?" the cutter's skipper asked as he clambered aboard. "Yes," Chuck said. "We're fine." "Then why did you send out a mayday?" he asked. "We got one still in the water, dead," Chuck said. "How do you know the man is dead?" "Because he's been underwater without a mask for at least half an hour," Chuck replied. "But he was dead when I reached him." The lieutenant nodded. "Where's the wreck?" 030, 120 yards is my best guess, Chuck replied, pointing in the direction of the reef. The lieutenant leaned over Fugitive's railing and began crisply giving orders. "2 men in full diving gear," he said, then told them the bearing and range. He turned back to Chuck. "Now tell me what happened." "We were going diving. Harry, that's Mrs. Karras's husband, went ahead of us toward the wreck. Harry said the wreck would be 100 yards away, but it was farther. I finally came upon it, and Harry was lying on deck. Well, not exactly lying. His tank was on deck, like he'd gotten out of it, and his mask was holding him in place against the current. His eyes were open, and there was blood in the mask." "What did you do then?" the lieutenant asked. "I was feeling nauseated by then, but I pulled the mask off him and tried to get him to the surface. Then I began vomiting, and I guess I panicked. I let go of Harry and popped my jacket. I was lucky to make it, I think." "What do you think was making you sick?" "Must have been something in the tanks." "You said there's a compressor aboard? I'd like to take a look at it." "Below," Chuck said. The officer disappeared below. He was gone less than 5 minutes, and when he came back, he was carrying a foot-long piece of clear plastic tubing by his thumb and forefinger. "You ever seen this before?" he asked. "No," Chuck replied. The lieutenant nodded. "Funny," he said. "Neither of you look very sick to me." It was nearly dark when the cutter came alongside the Coast Guard dock near Key West Bight. Fugitive, driven by a Coast Guard crewman, docked behind them. Chuck saw Tommy Scully and a very young man waiting on the dock. Chuck and Tommy sat on a sofa in the Karras living room. Claire was downstairs in her bedroom. Darrell sat on the opposite sofa, notebook at the ready. Tommy motioned to him. "Put that away for now," he said. Then he turned to Chuck. "Listen to me," he said. "I want you to tell me everything that happened from the time you got on the boat this morning, and don't leave anything out. I haven't read you your rights, so this is off the record." "Rights?" Chuck said, alarmed. He had watched enough television to know what it meant when the police started advising someone of his rights. Tommy put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry about that. I just want to know what happened out there today." Chuck started at the beginning and related everything he could remember about that day, from the time he'd set foot aboard Fugitive until they had returned to Key West. Tommy listened with complete concentration. When Chuck had finished, Tommy looked at him with some sympathy. "You've had a rough day," he said. "Why don't you go home and get something to eat? We'll talk more later." "Thanks," Chuck said. "I'll do that." "I'll call you tomorrow," Tommy said. As Chuck left the house, he turned back to see Claire leaving her bedroom and starting up the stairs. She was wearing a simple cotton dress, and she looked beautiful. Claire waited until the policeman had been gone for an hour, then got into the car and drove north. She parked in an empty supermarket parking lot and dialed a number on the car's phone. "Hello?" "It's me." The voice tensed. "Tell me." "It's done." "Any problems?" "No, it went pretty much the way you said it would. I stayed close to the boat, so when I got sick, I wasn't in any real trouble." "How about Chandler?" "He tried to get Harry to the surface, but he had to let him go." "Damn, I was counting on an autopsy." "Try and get some sleep tonight," he said. "We can meet tomorrow." "No!" she blurted out. "We can't go anywhere near each other, maybe for weeks." "I can't stay away from you for that long," he said, and his voice was shaky. "You have to. Florida has capital punishment, remember? And these days they're in a mood to use it. We have to be very, very careful. Things went well, and I think they're going to go even better. What I told the cops will make sure of that." "What did you tell them?" "I have to go now. Remember, no contact at all." She hung up, started the car, and drove back to the house. Tommy Scully sat across the desk from the lab technician and tried to see what the woman was typing on the form. Finally, she handed a copy to Tommy. "Carbon monoxide," she said. "Each tank was tested twice. Source is one test, ambient is the other. The results are expressed in parts per million. All 3 tanks are high in carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and methane." Pretty rich, huh? Very rich. Enough to kill? Plenty. If your man had put his mouth over a car's exhaust pipe, it couldn't be richer. The blue tank is different, though. While it's abnormally high in carbon monoxide, it contained only about 700 parts per million, less than a third of the other 2 tanks. Not enough to kill? Sure, if you breathed it long enough. What would it do to the breather? How long would it take the red and yellow tanks to kill, say, a guy who'd had 5 bypasses and prostate surgery, but who was otherwise in pretty good shape? Even in top shape, the breather wouldn't get far sucking on the red or yellow tanks. What do you mean by not far? A few minutes at most, very few. Tommy thanked the woman, and he and Darrell left the lab. Darrell spoke for the first time. "Chandler was wearing the blue tank?" "That's how it looks," Tommy said. "Let's ask him." Tommy and Darrell pulled into the waterfront market parking lot just as Chuck Chandler was parking the yellow Porsche Speedster across the road. "Hey, Chuck," Tommy called as he got out of his car. "Hi, Tommy, what's happening?" "Is Choke your boat?" "That's right. Could we take a look at her?" "Sure, come on down." "Wow," Tommy breathed. "I've never seen such good varnish work." "Thanks," Chuck said. "It took a lot of work. Can I get you guys a drink?" "Maybe some coffee or tea for us," Tommy said, catching Darrell's eye. "You go ahead and have something stronger if you like." "I think I will," Chuck said. Tommy poked around while Chuck made tea. The engine room was spotless. "You do the engine work?" Tommy asked. "Yeah, with the help of one of the guys." "You're a pretty handy guy," Tommy said. "Must be genetic. My father could fix anything, and I used to help him in his workshop." He handed each detective a glass of iced tea, then poured himself a gin and tonic. "I know this is a pain in the ass," Tommy said, "but I need to go over yesterday again. You mind?" "I guess I've got one more retelling left in me." Tommy held up a hand. "Let me go through the drill. You have the right to remain silent, but if you decide to talk to us, what you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney, and if you cannot afford one, want to be appointed to represent you. You understand these rights?" Chuck looked a little worried. "Tommy, are you arresting me or something?" No. I want you to understand that it's important that you tell me the truth at all times." "Sure. You want me to go on?" "Yeah. You arrived aboard the Fugitive." "Right. Harry was at the marina shop getting some beer, but he came back after a couple of minutes." "What did you do while you waited?" "Claire and I chatted." "About what?" "Just small talk." "Go on." "Well, we were out, I don't know, half an hour or 40 minutes, when the same thing happened as on the day you came out with us. Exhaust began coming up from below." "What happened then?" "Harry stopped the engines and turned on the fan to clear the engine room. Then I went below to fix the problem, which was the same as before. I put the hose back onto the overboard pipe and tightened both clamps. This time I put some safety wire on the clips to make sure they stayed put." "How long did this take exactly?" Chuck shrugged. 8 minutes, maybe 10 tops." "What'd you do then?" "Came back up, Harry started the engines, and we continued out to our dive spot. We arrived at the place, and I went forward to deal with the anchor. Then Harry went below and handed up 3 tanks, one for each of us. There's a compressor in the engine room." "Harry handed up the tanks?" "Yeah, Harry went on ahead of us." "Do you remember which tank Harry was wearing?" "Yeah, it was the red one, I'm sure. I remember the color when I saw Harry on the bottom." "Why didn't Harry wear a life jacket?" "He said he never bothered. Funny, I could swear he was wearing one the last time we dove together." "Do you remember, Tommy? You were there." "I believe he was. Tommy said. So you gave Harry the red tank, and you chose which one? Harry picked the red tank for himself, and Claire said for me to use the blue one, said it was the guest tank. She took the yellow one. You sure she said that? Positive. Okay, what happened next? Harry started out before I even had my gear on, and Claire asked me to catch up with him. Was she ready by that time? No, I was ready before she was. I helped her on with her tank, then I went after Harry. How many minutes was Harry ahead of you? Maybe 2 minutes, 5 at the outside. Go on. So, I followed Harry out to the wreck. It was farther than he had estimated, I think. I was very close to the wreck before I saw it. I was starting to feel sick. Did you see Harry then? Not immediately, not until I got closer. Then he was in plain view on the wreck's deck. Describe what you saw. He had gotten out of his tank, but he was still attached to it by the connecting hose. The regulator wasn't in his mouth. His eyes were open, and there was blood in his mask. I knew he'd stopped breathing because there were no bubbles coming from his mouth. What did you do? I went straight for him and got hold of his wrist. But then I vomited, spat out my regulator in the process, and I really panicked. I yanked the cord on my life jacket, and I popped to the surface. Did you think about going back for Harry? There was no way I could have done it. It was obvious to me that something was wrong with the air in my tank, so I had nothing to dive with, and Harry was at 60 feet. How long did it take you to get back to the yacht? Well, it must have taken me 5 or 6 minutes to reach the wreck, and probably twice that long to get back. Where was Claire all this time? I saw her hanging onto the diving platform, vomiting. Did you ask her what happened? No, we were both in pretty bad shape. I helped her onto the platform and out of her tank. Then I went up to the cockpit and radioed the Coast Guard. What did you and Claire talk about while you were waiting? I told her about Harry, but she didn't really respond. She seemed to be in shock or something. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, I was feeling pretty normal. Anything else you care to add? No, I guess that's about it. Tommy took a deep breath and blew it out. Well, we kind of got a problem here, Chuck. What problem? Some of your answers don't jibe with some of Claire's. Chuck furrowed his brow. Such as? Tell me again, how long were you in the engine room? 8, 10 minutes. Claire said it was more like 45 minutes. Chuck's eyes widened. That's ridiculous. Didn't take anywhere near that long. You're positive? Yes, I am. Something else. Claire says you handed Harry the red tank and her the yellow tank and chose the blue one for yourself. Not true. Claire told me to use the blue tank. She said it was the guest tank. Tommy nodded slowly. Then he produced a plastic bag from his pocket and held it up for Chuck to see. Inside was a 12-inch length of clear plastic pipe. Chuck, Tommy said, have you ever seen this before? Chuck stared at the plastic pipe as if it were a poisonous reptile. Yeah, I guess I've seen several thousand feet of that kind of tubing in my time. It's used a lot on boats. I don't mean this kind of pipe in general, Tommy said. I mean this piece of pipe in particular. What's going on, Tommy? Chuck, I think we've established that you're pretty handy on a boat or with anything mechanical. Would you say that's a fair judgment? Yeah, I guess so. What's your point? My point is that Harry Karras wasn't handy at all with mechanical things, that he never did his own work on his boat, that he didn't know how machinery worked. But you do. I guess I'm a little slow, Tommy. Why don't you just spell it out? Chuck braced himself. Well, it started with the lieutenant on the Coast Guard cutter. After arriving aboard Fugitive, he went below to the engine room, said he found this piece of plastic pipe on the floor right next to the air compressor. So, he also didn't find any safety wire on the hose clips securing the exhaust pipe. That's crazy. I'd put it on there less than an hour before. Safety wire just doesn't come off by itself. Could this piece of tubing have been used to join together the exhaust hose from an engine with the intake hose of the air compressor? Chuck's jaw fell, and he didn't speak. Chuck, What's your opinion of that possibility?" Chuck swallowed hard. "You think I did that, Tommy? I just want your opinion, Chuck. Could you join those two pieces of equipment together?" "Yes, you could, assuming the different hoses were the right diameters." Tommy leaned back in his chair and sipped his tea. "We had the air in the tanks analyzed. 2 of the tanks had enough carbon monoxide in them to kill in a matter of minutes. The 3rd tank was contaminated too, but not enough to kill in such a short time. Just enough to make whoever breathed it sick after a few minutes." Chuck stared at the detective. "And the 3rd tank was the blue one? My tank?" "That's right, Chuck. You see where I'm headed?" Chuck nodded. "I'm afraid I do." "Help me out here, Chuck. Show me how you couldn't have done this." "I was only below for 10 minutes, Chuck replied. "That wasn't enough time." "The lady says you're below for 45 minutes. "That's not true. But even if it were, the engines weren't running." Tommy raised a finger. "Good point. I need some more points like that. Chuck, how far do you figure it is from here to Fugitive's berth over there?" "I don't know, maybe 150 yards. You a good swimmer, Chuck? Could you swim over there and fill those tanks?" "I'd have to start Fugitive's engines to do that. That would get noticed at night." "Another good point," Tommy said. "Keep 'em coming." "All I can do is tell you the truth, Tommy." "So far you haven't told me the whole truth, have you, Chuck?" "What do you mean?" "Chuck, how long has the affair been going on?" Chuck looked back and forth at the two detectives. "Claire said she told you she was breaking it off, that she loved Harry, and that even though he was impotent, she didn't want to leave him for you." Tommy leaned forward. "Is that your recollection, Chuck?" Chuck sighed. "Just the opposite, Tommy. I told her I was breaking it off." "How long had it been going on?" "Almost from the moment I met her." "How often were you seeing her?" 2 or 3 times a week, whenever Harry was out of town on business." "Why did you want to break it off with Claire?" "Because I'd met a girl I could fall in love with." "What's her name?" "Meg Haley. She lives right over there." He turned and pointed at the empty berth. "At least, she did." "She lived on a boat?" "Yes." "So where's the boat?" "I don't know. When I came back here yesterday, she'd sailed." "The boat or the girl?" "Both. She and her brother Dan lived aboard." "I'd sure like to talk to Meg," Tommy said. "So would I." "Claire says that she was in love with you, that you'd manipulated her into talking about her leaving Harry." "Tommy," Chuck said finally, "do I need a lawyer?" "Couldn't hurt," Tommy replied. Darrell was quiet until they were in the car. "So why didn't you bust him?" he asked Tommy. "This is a quiz, Darrell," Tommy replied, exasperated. "Why didn't I bust him?" "Because you don't have enough evidence?" "You get an A." "You got motive and opportunity," Darrell said. "Motive, maybe. Opportunity, maybe. If you buy Claire Karras's end of what happened. It makes much more sense than Chuck's." "I'll give you that much," Tommy said. "Look at it this way, Darrell," Tommy said patiently. 1, Chuck wants Claire and her husband's money, so he knocks off Harry. 2, Claire wants Harry's money, so she sets up Chuck for the murder. 3, Chuck and Claire are in it together. I'm leaning a little bit toward they're in it together. Why? Because they've both got something to gain. Here's a 4th scenario. Somebody hates Harry. Maybe Harry stole from him, whatever. Anyway, he decides he'd be a much happier person if Harry stopped living. He tries twice and fails. Then he gets lucky, and Harry is fish food." "A possibility, I guess," Darrell admitted. "Let me give you another possibility. A 5th scenario. Claire is having it off with a 4th party, Mr. X. She and Mr. X want Harry unbreathing, So they knock him off and set up Chuck for the deed. I guess that's a pretty good possibility. Damn right it is. That's what's driving me crazy. We got 5 pretty good possibilities. That's too many. Something bothers me about the two of them being in it together, Darrell said. If they're in it together, why is Claire's story different from Chuck's? Darrell, I have hopes for you, Tommy said. If Chuck is after Claire and Harry's money, he wouldn't try to suck in Claire unless she started it. I think I like the Claire option. The Claire has engineered it and is setting up Chuck, Darrell said. Tell you the truth, I wouldn't mind seeing it come out that way. Tommy and Darrell stood on the steps of the Monroe County Courthouse, where the county coroner had heard all the evidence at an inquest and declared Harry Karras dead of unknown causes. They watched Claire Karras walk toward her car. "Excuse me, Detective Scully?" The two detectives turned to find a man standing behind them. He was solidly built and deeply tanned, with thick black hair. Tommy made him for Italian. "Yeah?" "My name is Barry Carmen. I'm a private investigator. I wonder if I could have a word with you in private about the Karras case." "Okay, what?" Tommy said. Carmen opened a briefcase, extracted an 8x10 glossy black and white photograph, and handed it to Tommy. "Tell me if you've ever seen this man before." Tommy looked at the photograph. It was a head and shoulders shot of a smiling man who appeared to be in his early 40s. He was overweight and had dark, very curly hair and thick sideburns. "No. Who is he?" "I think he could be Harry Karras." Tommy looked at the photograph more closely. "We're talking plastic surgery here, right?" "We would have to be talking plastic surgery, in addition to major weight loss, capped teeth, and, of course, almost 20 years of aging." Tommy looked at the photograph again. "What's this guy's name?" "Rocco Marinello." "And what's the connection with Karras?" "Marinello was a lawyer in L.A. Well, more than a lawyer, really. He was kind of a financial genius. He represented some clients of mine. 4 years ago, he decamped and left a note saying he'd gambled away his clients' money and couldn't face the music." "Was he married?" "And had a son in college. He had put enough in his wife's name to keep them both comfortable." "So why are you still looking for Marinello after so much time?" "Let's just say that my clients aren't the sort of people to forget about him. Of course, I can't reveal their identity." "Of course," Tommy said. "So what made you look in Key West, Mr. Carmen?" "I got a tip." Tommy's eyebrows went up. "Oh? From who?" "Anonymous. A woman's voice, though. She said, if you're still looking for Rocco Marinello, try Harry Karras in Key West." "What was the voice like?" "Youngish, muffled. It could have been anybody." Tommy nodded. "So what do you want from me?" "What are the chances of the body turning up?" "Not great," Tommy said. "The incident took place outside the reef, which means the Karras could be floating in Havana Harbor right now, or he could have caught the Gulf Stream and be on his way to Scotland, or something could have found him delicious." "Oh." Carmen looked crestfallen. "Tell me, do you know how long Karras and his wife were married?" "A little more than a year, she says. If he was Marinello, he probably wouldn't have told her, since he was such a careful man." "I agree," Carmen said. "I talked to her yesterday. I don't think she had a clue what I was talking about." "Are you going to report all this to your clients?" "I haven't decided." "You understand what might happen to Mrs. Karras if you do?" "It's crossed my mind." "Let me be straight with you, Mr. Carmen," Tommy said. "I don't want somebody's goons coming down here to my town and beating up on a citizen. You get my drift?" "I do. I don't think she knows anything about Marinello anyway." "That wouldn't much matter to your clients, would it? I mean, they're not likely to take her denials at face value, are they?" Carmen shook his head. "I wouldn't want that on my conscience." "Let's leave it at this, Mr. Carmen. If I find out something that might connect Karras to Marinello, I'll call you. You do the same for me, okay? Okay, Carmen replied. I don't see much point in hanging around this tropical paradise any longer. I'm going back to L.A. Thanks for your help, Detective. The PI got onto a scooter and drove away. What do you think? Tommy asked Darrell. He could be Marinello. Could be. But as far as you and I are concerned, it's moot. Karras is dead, and I'm not going to sick the mob on his widow. Are you? If somebody can clip the mob for a bundle and get away with it, it's okay with me. Later that night, Claire picked up the poolside phone and dialed. Hello? His voice was sleepy and slurred. Mr. Carmen? Yes? This is the person you talked to yesterday afternoon, do you remember? Yes, of course. He was awake now. I'm in Miami, and I have some information about the man whose photograph you showed me yesterday. You'll have to move fast, I'm afraid. I've left Key West, and I'm not coming back. I can move as fast as you like, Carmen replied. First, you have to promise me that you won't ever tell your clients you spoke with me. All right, I won't tell them. Do you have a Florida road map? Got one right here. Let me turn on the light. Do you see where Highway 1 leaves Key Largo and goes north? Yes. That goes to Homestead. From there, take Route 997 north until it joins 27. Then turn north. Got it. 27 crosses I-75 and there's a toll booth. There's a rest stop just before the toll booth. Stop there. I'll leave all the information in an envelope behind the toilet in the men's room. What sort of information is it? Everything you need to make the connection. But leave me out of it, remember? Don't worry, you won't even exist. That's the way I prefer it. Now you must leave at once to get there before dawn. After that, the rest stop will get busy. I can be out of the hotel in 10 minutes. Good. We won't be talking again. Don't get any speeding tickets. I won't. Thank you and goodbye. Goodbye. She hung up. He's all yours, she said to the man lying beside her. But you'd better hurry. The man stood up and started to get dressed. Search him and his car for any sign of Key West. Hotel bill, matchbooks, anything. And there's a photograph. Bring it to me. Gotcha. She stood up and kissed him. Thank you, baby, she said. Next time we meet, I'll do something special for you. I'll look forward to it, he said. You ready for lunch? Darrell asked later that day. Yeah, okay. How about the raw bar? That's good for me. Darrell put the car in gear. Darrell pulled into the parking lot, and the two detectives went in and asked for a table by the water. We're pretty jammed, Darrell, the young head waitress said. You mind sitting at the bar? Not at all, Susie, Darrell replied. Come on, Tommy, the tourists have got all the tables. Let's eat with the other locals. The noon news is on the TV. They found bar stools and ordered lunch. Tommy ate quietly, and Darrell followed his lead. Then Tommy's head snapped up at the TV set. What did she say that name was? What name? Darrell asked, looking at the TV. Somebody got off north of Miami. He watched as the camera roamed around a rest stop and looked inside a car. So? We haven't got enough to worry about? Shut up and listen, Darrell. The TV cut back to the anchorwoman on the noon news. This is the latest in a series of murders of tourists up and down Florida, she was saying. Mr. Carmen had rented the car at Miami International 4 days ago and had apparently been touring the area. There are no suspects yet in the murder. Holy shit, Tommy said softly. That's our car man from yesterday? Darrell asked. I'm going to find out, Tommy said. Finish my lunch for me. He headed for the payphones. When he came back, he was nodding. It was our comment, the PI from California. Come on, let's do some police work. Half an hour later, they met back at the car. What have you got? Tommy asked. Little old lady across the street says Mrs. Karras's car hasn't left the driveway since midnight. Think about it. Karras runs off with some bad people's money 4 years ago, and they've been looking for him ever since. Suddenly, a private eye gets a tip. Then he shows up in Key West, questions Claire. He tells us about it after the inquest, then next morning, bright and early, he's dead. Now, do you think there might be a connection between his murder and Claire Karras? Maybe. Maybe? Maybe? I can't see it any other way. Look, if she knocked off her husband, then she had to have some help. Not Chandler. She's trying to hand him to us for the murder. He wouldn't help her. She's got another boyfriend. And the boyfriend off Carmen? Gotta be. Who else? Somebody had to follow him from Key West. 4 hours is a long time without a piss. And the first time he stopped, somebody followed him into the men's room and cut his throat. Unless they knew where he was going and were waiting for him. No, they couldn't predict where he'd stop. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Or could they? When Tommy and Darryl pulled into the racket club parking lot, Chuck Chandler was on the court giving a tennis lesson to a young couple. They sat at a table next to the court and waited for him to finish. Morning, guys, Chuck said, flopping down next to them and wiping his face with a towel. How you doing? Tommy looked around and saw a black and white pull into the parking lot. He turned back to the tennis pro. Chuck, he said, it's time to get a lawyer. The best one you can find. It wasn't Tommy's first trip to L.A. Work had taken him there 3 or 4 times, so he knew the town little. He rented a car and drove up to Beverly Hills, then West Hollywood, where he'd booked at a sweet hotel on a quiet street. He'd stayed there once before. Carmen's office was in a 3-story, semi-seedy commercial building on Melrose, in a neighborhood that would soon be too expensive for a PI. Tommy found a parking meter up the street and walked back to the building. He looked up Carmen's name on the building's directory, then took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. Carmen Investigations, the sign on the door read. The place was too busy for messing with locks. He'd have to come back later. Back at his hotel, he ordered dinner from room service and set his alarm for 2 a.m. He was momentarily disoriented when the alarm went off, reaching for Rosie to ask what was wrong. Then he remembered. He showered to get himself fully awake, then slipped into his shoulder holster with a 9mm automatic in its sling and his badge and an extra clip fixed to the strap. He drove up and down Melrose twice, checking out the area, looking for parked police cars, especially unmarked ones. He parked around the corner from the office building, then locked the car and looked around. He had the street to himself. He walked down Melrose for half a block, then turned and walked back, then darted into the alley alongside Carmen's building. He reached up and grabbed the ladder on the fire escape. At the top, he took out his key ring and switched on the tiny flashlight attached. It worked remarkably well. The window was a double-hung sash with true divided lights. Good. That made for less noise. He turned sideways, drew back, and struck the top pane of the bottom sash sharply with his elbow. The glass shattered and fell into the hallway. Quickly, he reached through the broken pane, unlocked the window, raised it, stepped inside. Tommy went to Carmen's office door and switched on his tiny flashlight again, holding it between his teeth. From his wallet, he produced a set of small lockpicks and selected 2. He had it open inside a minute. He put away the lockpicks, opened the door, and stepped into the offices of Carmen Investigations. There was a small room with a receptionist's desk, a love seat and some old magazines, and an inner door led to Carmen's private office. Tommy lowered the shade on the only window and pulled the cheap curtains shut, then switched on the desk lamp and looked around. It was very neat. That encouraged him, because it meant Carmen's files would likely also be neat. Suddenly, the overhead light went on, and Tommy spun around to find a small woman pointing a large revolver in his direction. Her hand was trembling, but the pistol was pointing more or less at his middle. "This is a .357 Magnum," the little woman said, "and if you mess with me, it will make some very big holes in your chest." "I believe you, lady," Tommy said. "I'm a police officer. Can I show you my badge?" "You're a goddamn burglar." "I promise you, I'm a cop." Tommy pulled back his jacket and waited for a response. "That's not an LAPD shield. It's from Key West." "Horseshit. What would a Key West cop be doing burglarizing an office in L.A.? Anyway, you got a New York accent." "I put in 20 years on the NYPD," Tommy said. "Then I moved south and signed on in Key West." "Pull back your jacket again." Tommy did as she asked, revealing his badge. "No. More. All the way open." Tommy let her see the automatic in the shoulder holster. "Take it out with your left thumb and forefinger." Tommy lifted the pistol from his holster and held it up as if he had a dead rat by the tail. "Drop it in the wastebasket," she commanded. Tommy turned slightly and let go of the pistol. "Put your palms flat on the desk." Tommy thought the frisking was very professional. "You on the job?" "I'll ask the questions. Now explain yourself." "My name's Tommy Scully. I'm a detective in Key West, and I'm investigating the murder of Barry Carmen." "Barry was killed near Miami. The Dade County Sheriff's Office is the investigating authority. Lie to me again and I'll put one in your knee." "I'm not lying. Barry was in Key West the day before he died. He came to see me." "About what?" "Rocco Marinello." "What did he tell you about Marinello?" "That he disappeared from L.A. a few years back and that somebody had hired him, Barry, to find Marinello. Now, I'm cooperating with you, and I want some cooperation back." "What do you want to know?" "Are you a cop?" "I used to be." "What's your name?" "Rita Cortez." "What are you doing here at 3:00 a.m.? "Your turn. What are you doing here?" "Trying to find out who hired Barry to find Marinello." "Why?" "Your turn. What are you doing here at 3 a.m.? She sighed. "I came to look for some papers. It's the only time of day I can come here without mixing it up with Barry's wife. Excuse me, widow." "How'd you get in?" "I have a key. I worked for Barry. In fact, we were supposed to be partners. It was the partnership papers I was looking for." "Do you and Barry have a little thing going on, Rita?" She nodded. He had already left her. The divorce was in the works. "Your turn again. Why do you want to know who hired Barry to find Marinello?" "I think there may be a Key West connection to Barry's murder. I want to find out what he reported back to his client, what he found out in Key West. The guy Barry thought might be Marinello is dead. He was killed a week before Barry arrived in town." "Shit," she said. "Huh?" "Finding Marinello would have been a big plum for Barry." Tommy nodded. "Tough break." Rita stood up and laid the pistol on her chair. She went to Carmen's desk, opened a bottom drawer, and extracted a bottle of wild turkey and 2 glasses. She poured 2 healthy shots and handed him one. "Better days," Tommy said. "Tell me something, Tommy," she said. "Anything. If Marinello was this guy in Key West and he died, the money didn't die with him, did it?" "I guess not." "Where would it go, do you think?" "The guy had a wife." "Then the wife's got the money?" "If she's the wife." "What do you mean, if she's the wife?" "I've no way of knowing for sure that my murder victim in Key West was Marinello." "He was murdered?" "That's right." She went to a file cabinet and started flipping through it. "This Marinello thing was our first shot at some really good money. Barry was offered $100,000 to turn him up." That's good money, Tommy said. Who hired him? Rita stopped flipping through the files and looked at him. Later, maybe, she said, then went back to the files. Maybe she didn't trust him so much after all. Any luck in the files? He asked. Not yet. Did Barry have a safe? She nodded. Right-hand side of the desk, what looks like 2 drawers is a door. He never gave me the combination. Tommy opened the door and looked at the safe. Too good for me. He began opening desk drawers, feeling the edges and bottoms. What are you doing? I bet he wrote down the combination somewhere. The computer, he said. She went to the machine, switched it on, then sat down and waited for it to boot up. She switched to the directory and moved the cursor down the list. She stopped on a file called Security and opened it. Aha, Tommy said as a list of numbers appeared on the screen. That was easy. It might not have been if you hadn't been here, Rita said. I don't know how long it would have taken me to think about going through the computer. She knelt before the safe and began twirling the knob. In a moment she had it open and was shuffling through papers. Here it is, she cried. Signed and notarized, and only 2 weeks ago. Good for you, Tommy said, clapping her on the back. There's a copy of the will, too. She flipped through the pages until she found what she wanted. It refers to the partnership document and says I get the business. That's great, Rita, Tommy said, genuinely glad for her. Maybe you better make copies of these, put them back in a safe for Myrna to find. That way she can't stiff you. Rita went to a copying machine against the wall, made the copies, and returned the originals to the safe. There's this, too, she said, handing Tommy a photograph. Barry showed me this. It's Marinello. I doubt if he still looks like this, though. Yeah, this is at least 15, 20 years old, according to the client. When Marinello stole the money, did the client beef to the cops? Rita shook her head. These are the kind of people who do their own missing persons work, if you get my drift. I do. You ready to tell me who the client is? She smiled. Maybe so. What was the victim's name? Tommy shook his head. There's more involved here. What? After you tell me who the client is, I want to go see him, and I don't want him to know about the dead guy yet, if Barry didn't already tell him. I don't want a bunch of goons coming onto my turf and calling on the widow. Okay, maybe she's a regular black widow, but she may not be Mrs. Marinello, and she shouldn't have to pay the guy's dues. She looked at him carefully. Are you married? Tommy laughed. Very. Too bad. All the good ones are married. Tell you what, Rita, you put me with the client, and when I'm sure that all my bases are covered, I'll tell you the whole story. Rita looked at her watch. It's not open for business yet. Come on, I'll buy you some breakfast. She got up and headed for the door. Tommy stood in front of his hotel, freshly shaved and dressed in a suit. A red Volkswagen convertible screeched to a halt, top down, Rita at the wheel. Sorry I'm late. Tommy got into the car. Tell me about the client. His name is Barton Winfield. Yeah? I was expecting a name that rhymed with macaroni. Your expectations are not misplaced. The guy's name used to be something else. The offices of Winfield and Carrington were like a movie set for a white shoe law firm. After a 10-minute wait, they were shown into a corner office. Winfield rose to meet them. He was 60-ish, widening at the middle, gray at the temples, and beautifully tailored. He was also very gracious. Please sit down, Miss Cortez, Mr. Scully. Miss Cortez, I was so very sorry to hear of Mr. Carmen's death. He always struck me as an extremely competent man. Thank you, Mr. Winfield, Rita replied. I wanted you to know that since Barry and I were partners, I will now be running the firm. Oh, good, he said. I hope we can send some work your way. He turned to Tommy. "Tell me, Mr. Scully, are you a private investigator as well?" "No, sir," Tommy said. "I'm a police officer in South Florida." Winfield blinked, but recovered quickly. "Are you the investigating officer in Mr. Carman's case?" "No, sir, I'm involved in a more tangential way," Tommy replied. "In fact, my visit here is entirely unofficial and off the record." "I see," Winfield said, obviously not seeing at all. "And what can I do for you?" "During Mr. Carman's investigation of the missing person in question, he came to me unofficially to check out some things. It occurred to me that there might be a direct connection between Mr. Carman's death and the matter he was pursuing." "It was my impression that Mr. Carman met his death as the result of one of those ugly tourist killings." "I'm inclined to think that's not the case, sir, although I believe some effort was made to make it appear to be such a murder. Also, it appears there might possibly be a connection between the missing person in question—" "His name is Marin," Winfield said. "You may use it." "Between Mr. Marin and another case I'm investigating. I believe that if I were able to locate Mr. Marin, it might materially help my investigation." "If you find Marin, what will you do?" "I would detain him on a minor charge and notify Ms. Cortez immediately." "And how long would he likely be in custody?" "I could hold on to him for 24 hours. "I see," Winfield said. "What would you like to know?" "When did you first meet Mr. Marin?" "Our families knew each other when we were very young, and we were both at Stanford. Later, we opened this firm. We did very well. We had a very large amount of money in the firm's trust account. Before the funds could be transferred to the client, Marin raided the trust account and decamped with the funds." "May I ask how much he took?" "Let's say many millions of dollars. I made arrangements to replace the funds, with great difficulty, I might add, and our clients were simply told that Marin had taken his own life, a notion which he took some pains to further. That's extraordinary." "I'm aware of that. Nevertheless, it's what I did. To this day, I do not wish for any client of mine to know that a member of this firm behaved in such a manner. That's why I hired Mr. Carman, so that this matter might be resolved in a private manner." "And if Marin is found, how do you intend to resolve it?" "That question, Mr. Scully, is outside the parameters of this discussion." "Can you think of anything else that might help me? Some personal characteristic to look out for, some weakness?" "Nothing I haven't already told you." Tommy closed his notebook. "Thank you, Mr. Winfield. If I learn anything, I'll communicate it to Miss Cortez." Back in the car, Rita was the first to speak. "Does Marin sound like your dead guy in Key West?" Tommy shrugged. "Might be, might not. There are some similarities, but who knows?" "Can I buy you dinner tonight?" "I'd love to, but I got a plane to catch." Rita laughed ruefully. "The good ones always have a plane to catch." On his first morning back in Key West, Tommy picked up Darrell and headed for Day Street, along the way explaining what he had learned in Los Angeles. "Sounds to me like the guy could be Karras," Darrell said. "But what are you going to talk to Claire about?" Tommy thought it through. "You're right. It's not worth the risk. Maybe what we should do is to reassure her, make her more comfortable." "I like that," Darrell said. "You're wise beyond your years, kid." Claire Karras made a very good widow, Tommy thought. She seemed a little more demure today, more restrained. "What can I do for you, Detective?" she asked. "I just wanted to bring you up to date on our investigation, Mrs. Karras." "Do you have a suspect?" "We do. I now believe that Chuck Chandler murdered your husband." She sighed. "I didn't want to believe it," she said, "but I'm afraid I've been drawn to that conclusion myself. Have you arrested him yet?" "No." "Why not?" Well, the weight of evidence points to him. He certainly had a motive, and there is reason to believe he had the technical skills to accomplish it, but we don't have any physical evidence to link him to the crime. Darrell was right. He couldn't read what she was thinking. Still, he could make a wild guess. They met behind a failed boarded-up restaurant off Route 1 near Isla Morada. "We've got a problem," she said. "What's that? I thought everything was going smoothly now with Carmen out of the way." "That situation's resolved. You did good work, but we have another problem." "What is it?" He sighed, zipping up his trousers. "The police believe Chuck killed Harry, but Scully says he doesn't have enough evidence to make it stick. We have to arrange something else, some piece of physical evidence that the DA can hold up to a jury and say, 'See, he did it, no doubt.'" "That may be easier said than done." "Oh, you can handle it, sweetie," she said. "All right, I'll think on it." He reached for her. "No," she said. "We can't take a chance staying here any longer. I'll go first. You wait." Grudgingly, he got out of the car and waved goodbye. She pulled back onto the highway, looking around to be sure she hadn't been followed. He'd come up with something. She was sure of it. In the meantime, she'd have to turn her own attention to the problem. Tommy and Darrell were in the chief's office, and Tommy wasn't looking forward to the meeting. He watched glumly as the chief entered and arranged himself at his desk. "Sorry I wasn't here to see you when you got back from L.A., the chief said. "How'd it go?" "It was interesting," Tommy said. "Interesting?" the chief asked, and his face began to redden. "You just been off on a department-paid junket to Hollywood, and it was only interesting? You better do better than that, boy." Tommy gave his boss a blow-by-blow on his trip to L.A., omitting his breaking and entering of Carmen's office. The chief blinked. "So? What does all this have to do with the murder of Harry Karras?" "There's a pretty good chance that Karras was Marinello, or Marin, as he liked to be called." "Great. How does that solve his murder?" "It doesn't exactly solve it, but it certainly widens the pool of suspects to include the L.A. branch of the mob, whose money he stole." "How does that help us?" "Well, if we can establish that Karras was Marinello, then it's the mob, not Chuck Chandler or Claire Karras, who becomes the chief suspect, and that means we just might not solve this one. Those boys don't leave a lot of tracks." The chief began blinking rapidly. "Now, come on. I want you to give me, right now, your best theory for those who committed this murder." "All right, sir. I think that Harry Karras was murdered by Claire Karras and an unknown man." "Tell me why you believe that." "Chandler said he was in the engine room for less than 10 minutes that day. That's not enough time for him to sufficiently contaminate the tanks. He also told us that Harry chose the red tank, the one that was the most contaminated, and that Claire said that Harry always used the red tank and she used the yellow tank, which left the blue, least contaminated tank, for Chuck to use. Chuck, if you believe his story, didn't know any of this until Claire explained it to him. So Harry gets hooked up to the red tank and swims away before Chuck is ready to follow him." "Who's the other man, and why is it a man?" The answer to your first question is, I don't know, yet. The answer to your second question is that Claire Karras doesn't strike me as the type to want to share Harry's money with a woman. The lady's a human black widow spider. It's what she does best. Tommy suddenly sat up in his seat and his eyes widened. "Holy shit," he said softly. "What?" demanded the chief. "What, Tommy?" Darrell asked. She's going to kill him. Kill who? Darrell asked. The other guy. The one we don't know about? The chief asked. Right. She's going to kill him as sure as we're sitting here. She doesn't need him anymore. She's suckered in some poor schmuck to do the dirty work for her, to kill Harry and almost certainly Carmen, and now she's going to blow him off. And when this lady blows you off, you end up dead. So why hasn't she already killed him then? The chief demanded. Because we haven't nailed her patsy, Chuck Chandler. The minute she thinks we got enough evidence to convict Chuck, the other schmuck's dead. What further use is he to her? And he's the only one who can involve her in Harry's murder. Okay, the chief said. What's your theory if he's lying and Mrs. Karras is telling the truth? Tommy shrugged. That would cast a different light on things, I guess. In that case, Chandler would look real good for the murder. Go get a warrant and conduct the search. Is that clear? Then, if you don't find anything, we'll think about searching the Karras house. Yes, Chief, Tommy said wearily. He got up and walked out of the office, with Darrell tagging along behind. The two detectives sat on the dock, waiting. When the yellow Porsche Speedster pulled into the parking lot and Chuck Chandler got out of the car, Darrell reached into his pocket for the warrant. Put that away, Tommy said. I want to give Chuck the opportunity. It'll look better in court for him. Whatever you say. Evening, gentlemen, Chuck said. Evening, Chuck, Tommy replied. Would you object to our searching your car? For what? For evidence. Chuck thought for a minute. Oh, what the hell? All right. He unlocked both doors and the detectives went to work. They found nothing inside the car or in the engine bay at the rear. Want to open the trunk for us, Chuck? Tommy asked. Sure. Chuck opened the trunk and stepped back. Tommy and Darrell went to work. Uh-oh, Tommy said. What? Darrell responded. Tommy reached under the spare tire and came back with a piece of clear plastic hose around 18 inches long. I've never seen that before in my life, Chuck said. Tommy held the hose up to the light and looked at it carefully. Let's all go down to the station house, he said. Chuck, you can follow us. All right, Chuck said. It was quiet in the squad room when the three men walked in. Tommy handed Darrell a key. Open our evidence locker and bring me the piece of tubing the Coast Guard found on the Karras boat. Darrell returned with the hose still in a plastic bag. Tommy laid the two pieces on his desk, end to end. Look what we got here, he said. He pushed the hoses together. The original piece was cut in two, and the edges are jagged. They fit together perfectly. Tommy held up the two pieces. Chuck, I'm telling you the truth now. This could get you the death penalty if you're not telling me the truth. I swear to you, Tommy. Tommy nodded. Last chance, Chuck. I can ignore anything you might have been wrong on so far, but now I've got to have the truth. You've already got the truth, Tommy. I hope you're right, Chuck, Tommy said. Later, on board Choke, Chuck went to the little bar and poured himself a stiff bourbon, then sat down again and tossed back the drink. When his hands had stopped trembling, he picked up the phone and dialed. Hello? His star student said. Hi, Billy? It's Chuck. Can I speak to your dad? Sure, hang on. Hi, Chuck, it's Norman Tubbs. Norman, can I ask a very large favor of you? Chuck, after Billy's performance lately, you can ask just about anything of me. Chuck took a deep breath and asked. The following morning, Chuck and Norman Tubbs sat in the Tubbs airplane at the end of the runway and waited for a clearance from the tower to take off. "Where do you want to go?" Norman asked. "I want to fly as low as you legally can, up one side of the Keys and down the other. I want to look at every anchorage between here and Key Largo." "You got it, Chuck," Norman said. 9235 Delta, cleared for takeoff, the tower controller said. "Say direction of flight." 35 Delta, Norman responded. "Roger," the tower said. Norman pushed the throttles forward, and the little twin Cessna roared down the runway. "What are we looking for, anyway?" Norman asked. "A catamaran of about 50 feet, yellow hull." "Does this have anything to do with a girl?" "Of course it does, Norman." They started up the east side of the Keys, and each time they came to an anchorage, they circled, looking for the catamaran. It took them nearly 2 hours to reach Key Largo, and, after circling the marina there, they headed down the western side of the island chain. They were nearly back to the Naval Air Station on Boca Chica, having had no luck, when Chuck pointed east. There, in the distance. Norman banked the airplane into a steep left turn, and after he cleared the eastern shore, started a descent. Chuck watched as they neared the yacht. He strained to see who was at the wheel. There was no one. "She's under self-steering," Chuck said. "Can you make a low pass right over her cockpit? Let's see if we can scare up somebody." Norman did as he was asked, and as they passed over the yacht, a woman's head popped up through the hatch. "There she is, it's Meg!" Chuck shouted. "Looks like she's headed toward Little Palm Island," Norman said. "Okay, that's it," Chuck said. "We can go home now." Back on the ground, Chuck ran for his car. Chuck pulled to a stop at the marina that served Little Palm Island. He went around to the marina office and, after a brief negotiation, rented a small Boston whaler, and in a few minutes he was headed down the little canal toward open water. A couple of miles down the little bay were half a dozen yachts at anchor, and soon he could make out the outline of the Haley's catamaran. There was no one in the cockpit, but the hatch was open. "Meg?" he called out. There was a muffled sound of someone moving below, and a female head emerged from the hatch. It was not Meg. "Yeah, what is it?" the woman asked. She was a 30-ish brunette. "I'm looking for Meg Haley," he said. "Is she aboard?" "Who wants to know?" the woman asked. "Chuck Chandler." The woman looked below. "Chuck Chandler," she said to somebody. "Tell him to go to hell." "Meg," Chuck shouted, "please come up here and talk to me. It's very important." "Get out of here, Chuck!" "Meg, the police want to talk to you." A short silence. "What? Haven't you heard what's happened? Is this some kind of trick?" "Meg, please come up here. I've got to talk to you." The brunette's head vanished and was replaced by Meg's. She looked sleepy and tousled. "All right, what?" "Haven't you heard what's happened?" "What are you talking about?" "Can I come aboard?" "Don't even think about it." "Meg, Harry Karras has been murdered." She stared at him uncomprehendingly for a moment. Then the penny dropped. "You mean the witch's husband?" "That's the one." "Who killed him?" "A large body of opinion holds that I did." "Did you?" "Of course not." "Chuck, if this is some kind of trick to get next to me again, it's not a trick. It happened the day you packed up and left." "I told you not to go, didn't I?" "Yes, and that's what you've got to tell the police." She looked around. "Where are the police?" "In Key West. I'll take you to the detective in charge right now, if you'll let me." She stared at him for a moment. "Chuck, if you're just trying to get round me, I swear—" "Come on, Meg. Get some clothes on and I'll drive you to Key West. I'll have you back here by sunset." Her shoulders slumped. "Oh, what the hell." She disappeared below. Chuck sat in the boat, holding on to the gunwale of the cat, and waited. 10 minutes later she came up, dressed in jeans and a cotton sweater. It was the most clothing he had ever seen her wear. She handed him a large handbag and got into the whaler. He started the engine and headed back to the marina. "Who's the girl?" he asked. "Dan picked her up in Eleuthera. She was stranded. And that's all I've got to say." She refused to look at him. At police headquarters in Key West, he asked for Tommy Scully, and after a moment, Tommy appeared. "Tommy, this is Meg Haley," Chuck said. "The girl on the boat next to mine, the one you wanted to talk to?" "Oh, that girl," Tommy said. "Yes, Miss Haley, we would like to ask you some questions. Chuck, why don't you go home and I'll call you when we're done." Later, Tommy Scully and his partner pulled into the parking lot and got out, followed by Meg. The three walked toward the boat. Chuck met them. "Here she is, Chuck," Tommy said. "That's quite a girl you got there." "I'm afraid I don't have her," Chuck said. "Oh," Tommy said. "Well, we'll be going. She was very helpful to your case, Chuck." He and Darrell walked away. "Would you like some iced tea?" he asked. "Was that you in the airplane this morning?" "Yes. A friend flew me out to look for you." "You needed me to back up your story?" "That too," he said. She placed a hand on his cheek. "You really have been in a lot of trouble, haven't you?" He nodded. She reached up and kissed him lightly on the lips. "Don't ever leave me again to spend a day with another woman," she said. "I won't," he replied. "I promise." It occurred to him that he had never promised anything like that to any woman. Back in the car, Tommy said, "Let's go down to the old Island Tennis Club. I'd like to talk to Victor." "How come?" "Remember when we were searching Chuck's car, he said he'd left the trunk locked, but it had been unlocked?" "Yeah. I was just wondering how somebody else might have had access to Chuck's car keys. And Chuck's locker in the clubhouse, right?" "Right." "What do you think?" Darrell asked, after Tommy had questioned Victor. "Is Victor in this somehow?" "I don't think so," Tommy said. "Like Chuck Chandler, he doesn't strike me as the type." "What do you know about Merck, the guy who runs the place?" "Not much." "Neither does Victor, or anybody else." Darrell shifted his weight and switched radio stations for something that would keep him awake. He had followed Merck Connor home from the tennis club 3 hours before, and Merck was still inside. Then, as he watched, there was the movement of a shadow behind the house, and a figure vaulting over a low fence and disappearing toward the next street. Darrell followed slowly. Merck never window-shopped or slowed down. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, and was in a hurry to get there. He was getting closer and closer to Day Street and Claire Karras. From a block back, Darrell saw Merck suddenly turn into a building, and he resisted the temptation to run to catch up. It took him a full minute to make up the distance and find that Merck had turned into a bar. Darrell pushed open the door and walked in. People turned and looked at him as if they'd been expecting him to arrive. He ambled up to the bar and ordered a beer. Suddenly it came to him that he was in a gay bar, and that Merck was not present. At the other end of the bar he spotted another door to the side street. Cursing under his breath, he left and headed toward the door. "Don't rush off," a man at the bar said as he passed. The bar was a block and a half from Claire's house. Darrell turned into Elizabeth Street, parked, and called Tommy on his portable phone. "Hello?" "Tommy, it's Darrell. Merck stayed home for better than 3 hours, then suddenly left the house by the back door and walked over to Duval Street." "Did you follow him?" "Yeah, to a bar that turned out to be full of extremely graceful young men, but he wasn't there. There was a back door, and by the time I figured it out, he had disappeared." "How far was the place from the Karras house?" A little more than a block." "Bingo," Tommy said. "I think we've found our man." Tommy arrived at the station the following morning to find Darrell there ahead of him, working at the computer. "Hi," the younger man said. "I'm logged on to the state crime computer right now. It's doing a search on Merck." "You're sure he left the bar before you did?" "I'm sure. The place wasn't all that crowded, and I looked at every face." "Okay." "Oops. Looks like we came up empty," Darrell said. "No record," the computer screen read. "Try the FBI computer." "Bingo," Darrell said. Tommy grabbed the sheet as it came out of the printer. "Well, well," he said. "Mild-mannered Merck wasn't always so mild-mannered. He had 2 arrests for assault with a deadly weapon in 1970 in California. No convictions. And looky here, he got a year for battery in L.A. a few months later and served 4 months on the county farm. He was picked up on a parole violation, what looks like a barroom brawl a couple of months after that. Then nothing. I guess he's been clean since then." When Chuck got home from work, the yellow catamaran was once again moored next to Choke, and Meg, her brother Dan, and his new girlfriend were seated in the cockpit, drinking margaritas. "Chuck," Meg said, "you haven't met Charlie." Chuck turned to the girl and stuck out his hand. "Charlie what?" "Just Charlie," she said, shaking his hand. She was petite and auburn-haired, with a gammon figure that looked wonderful in the bikini. "Where are you from, Charlie?" Chuck asked. "Grew up in the San Fernando Valley, lived in L.A. and Las Vegas for a while after school." Chuck said, "Meg, why don't we invite this lovely couple aboard Choke for dinner?" "Suits me. I'll pick up some steaks at the market and you go rustle up a salad. The fixings are in the fridge." "I'll take a shower if we're going out," Dan said. "Charlie, we need a few things too. Why don't you go along with Chuck?" He handed her some money, which Charlie tucked into her bikini bra. Chuck and Charlie strolled along the quay to the waterfront market, chatting idly. In the market, they each got a basket and went their separate ways, stocking up. Chuck had chosen the steaks and selected a couple of bottles of wine and was headed for the register when Charlie appeared from behind a shelf, looking flustered. "Something wrong?" Chuck asked. "I just saw somebody I used to know and don't want to know anymore. Let's just stay here for a minute until the coast is clear." "You wait here. I want to get some bread." Chuck left her with her cart and went toward the baked goods counter. He was nearly there when Claire Karras passed in front of him, looking neither to her left or right. Chuck was happy she hadn't seen him. He had no desire to talk to her. He got the bread and went back for Charlie. "Was it a woman you were avoiding?" he asked the girl. "You could say that," Charlie replied. "You could also call her a snake." "Is her name Claire Karras?" "It was Claire Connor when I knew her." "She's checked out by now. The coast is clear." They paid for their groceries and started back. "Where did you know her?" Chuck asked. "In Vegas. She was a pro." It took Chuck a moment to figure out that she wasn't talking about tennis. "You mean she was a hooker?" "No, I was a hooker. She was my boss." "Oh," Chuck said, his eyebrows going up. "Don't be so shocked," Charlie said. "Dan knows about it. It's okay with him." "I didn't mean to seem shocked," Chuck replied. "It's just that I was shocked," Charlie said. "Okay, shocked." Claire was running a string out of the Empress Hotel, and she was married to the tennis pro at the hotel. She's an absolute bitch. "What was the tennis pro's name?" "Connor, I guess. I never knew his first name." "That is really strange," Chuck said. "The guy I work for here is named Connor, and he's a tennis pro." "Charlie, would you do me a favor?" "What kind of favor?" "There's a guy I know I'd like you to meet." "No, thanks, Chuck. I'm out of that game," she said. "He's a cop, not a potential client." "Well, If I can help, sure. Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate it very much. No problem. Later, Tommy listened, rapt, as Charlie told her story. When she had finished, he sat there, grinning. Tommy and Darrell immediately took the news to the chief. You going to pull in Merc Connor, then? I don't think we're ready for that, Chief. Why not? Right now, our strongest card is that Claire Karras and Merc Connor don't know that we know about their connection. I think we're better off keeping an eye on both of them and wait for them to make a mistake of some kind. A mistake of some kind? I'm sorry, Chief, but we have to play this game with the cards we're dealt, and right now our hand just isn't strong enough. Okay, the Chief said. Then it's my deal. Here's what you're going to do, and I don't want to hear a word of objection from either of you, understand? Yes, sir, the two detectives said simultaneously. The sun was low in the sky as Tommy and Darrell pulled up to the Old Island Tennis Club. They could see Chuck Chandler as he ended a lesson and walked from the court toward the clubhouse. Come on, Tommy said. We've got our orders. Let's make it look good. Tommy led the way past the courts and into the clubhouse. Chuck was talking to his student about a racket and how it should be strung. Merc was in his office working at the computer. Let's wait till he's done, Tommy said in a low voice. Merc turned at his desk and saw Tommy. He got up and came out from behind the counter. Hi, can I help you guys? We just want a word with Chuck, Tommy said, when he's finished. He watched Merc go back to his desk. The student thanked Chuck for his advice and left. Chuck turned and saw the two detectives. Hi, Tommy, he said. What's happening? Tommy stepped up to the counter. Chuck, you're under arrest for the murder of Harry Karras. What? Chuck said weakly. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed by the court to defend you. If you choose to talk to us, anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. Do you understand these rights? Tommy, you can't believe it. I'll forego the handcuffs if you'll give me your word not to make a disturbance. Well, sure I will, but... Darrell, go to the locker room with Chuck while he changes. Tommy watched the two men leave the room. He leaned against the counter and waited. After a moment, Merc, who had heard everything, got up from his desk and walked over to the counter. Tommy, did I just hear right? Merc asked. You did, Merc. You really think he did it? That's where new evidence leads us. I can't comment further than that. Jesus, Merc said under his breath. What? I was just wondering where I'm going to get somebody on short notice to take his classes. Merc, Tommy thought, you're a sweet guy. Tommy looked at Chuck in the rearview mirror. He was wiping sweat from his face with a towel. Chuck, listen to me, he said. Chuck looked up and his face was haggard. This is not as bad as it seems, he said. We're not going to the station. We're going directly to the courthouse. Your lawyer is meeting us there. I don't understand, Chuck said. The chief has spoken to the DA and the judge. You're going to be arraigned in chambers and released on bail. You'll spend the night at my house, then you'll go back to work tomorrow morning. Now I really don't understand, Chuck said. The judge did not seem at all happy about the proceedings. This is the damnedest thing anybody's ever asked me to do, he said. Do you people think a murder charge is some kind of game? Chief, do you want to tell me what's going on here? The judge demanded. Judge, we don't believe that Mr. Chandler committed this murder. I'll let Detective Scully explain, the chief said. Tommy stepped forward. Your Honor, we're at an impasse in this case. There is circumstantial evidence weighing against Mr. Chandler, but we believe the murder to have been done by other parties. We believe that these parties have caused it to seem that Mr. Chandler is guilty, and that they are waiting for his arrest before making their next move. Is there any material evidence against Mr. Chandler? There is, but we believe it to have been planted by the other parties. Mr. Chandler, you are hereby released on $100,000 bond. He looked around at the others. Is that all you want, gentlemen? There was a murmur of assent from the group. Wonderful, the judge said. Just wonderful. That evening, Chuck sat at the dinner table in Tommy and Rosie's new house and ate pasta. I'm sorry I had to put you through that, Chuck, Tommy said, pouring him some more wine, but we had to make it look good for Merc. Nothing I could have said would have been as effective as the look on your face. And now you want me to go back to work tomorrow? Right. There will be a story in tomorrow morning's Key West Citizen announcing an arrest, but withholding your name. You think Merc will take me back? Why not? No one knows but him. And anyway, the last thing he said to me had to do with finding your replacement. Chuck dialed the racket club and waited. Merc finally answered, and Chuck explained the situation. Merc seemed surprised, but he agreed to let Chuck come back to work. One more call to make, Tommy said. This one's mine. He looked up the number, held a finger to his lips, and dialed the number. Hello? Mrs. Karras? This is Tommy Scully. How are you? I'm all right, Detective. You'll feel better after what I have to tell you. I hope so, she said. What is it? We've arrested your husband's murderer. Well, that is good news, she said. It's Chuck Chandler, of course. Yes, ma'am. I'm so relieved, she said. I don't know what took you so long. I thought you'd never arrest him. It's only recently that some physical evidence came into our hands. We had to have that before we could move, Tommy said. Thank you for letting me know. She hung up. Tommy put the phone down and held up a thumb. Now, let's see what she does. Claire dialed the number on her portable phone. Yeah? They've arrested him, she said. I heard, he replied. The length of hose apparently did it. There was a mention of new evidence. We'll make our move soon. I look forward to it. She hung up, took a deep breath, and sighed. At last, she said aloud to herself. When Chuck and Victor arrived for work the next day, Merc called them into his little office. I wanted to talk to both of you, he said. What's up? Chuck asked. I've decided to give up the Key West Club and concentrate on Santa Fe. I got a local investor out there who will finance fixing up the facilities, and I think by concentrating on the one place I can do better, which leaves the old Island Racket Club up for sale. You guys interested? Chuck and Victor looked at each other. Yes, they said simultaneously. Okay, here's the deal, and I'm afraid there's no room for negotiation. It's take it or leave it. $20,000 apiece, and it's yours. I'll stay on for a week and teach the computer program to whoever you hire to do the bookkeeping. What do you say? Let us talk about it for a minute, Chuck asked. Go right ahead. Chuck pulled Victor into the locker room. Well? I've been expecting this, so I already run the numbers, and it sounds good to me. You think Meg would do the inside job? Probably. You want to do this? Okay with me. I'm assuming you've got 20 grand, Chuck said. I can manage a check today. I can write a check on my brokerage account. That didn't get tied up for bail? No, just the boat. Chuck, are you going to beat the murder rap? I didn't do it, so I'm going to beat it. Trust me on that, Victor. They went back into the office. You've got a deal, Chuck said, and they all shook hands on it. During their lunch break, they paid Merc, sealing the deal. At the end of the day, Victor said, Why don't you go get Meg? Let's go to Louis for dinner. I think we're due a celebration. You're on, partner. The three of them sat on the rear deck at Louis' backyard, sipping vodka gimlets and perusing the menu. "You know," Victor said, "I knew Murk was thinking about this, but I was worried about handling it on my own. I'm glad to have a partner. The truth be told, I'm not a businessman." "Bad news," Chuck said. "Neither am I." When they left the restaurant, they found themselves in possession of 2 cars and only one person, Meg, sober enough to drive. "All right," she said. "Pile into the speedster. Victor, you're sleeping aboard Choke." "Your wish, etc., madam," Victor said, squeezing into the small space behind the 2 seats. "We are not going to make a habit of this, though," she said. "Partners or no partners." "Yes, ma'am," Victor muttered, then began snoring. Murk Connor left the tennis club later than usual and drove home. He unlocked the door of the little conch house and picked up the mail. At the bottom of the stack he found an envelope with no stamp and his name written in a flowing hand. He thought he recognized the handwriting, and anxiously he tore open the envelope. Inside he found a note and a check made out to his name in the amount of $25,000, unsigned. He read the note. It was brief. "Bring this note to the Gulfstream Marina on Stock Island at 3 a.m. sharp tomorrow morning, and I'll sign the check. Be sure you're not followed. I'll be in slip 19. Darrell was on his second night of watching Murk Connor, and he couldn't say he was enjoying the stakeout. He and Tommy were spread thin, what with watching both Murk and Claire Karras, so he had a long night to look forward to. Then he saw, as he had the last time, a figure leave the back door of the house and vault over the fence. He got the car started, drove around the block to Duval, and just as he had before, Murk emerged into the street and walked briskly west. This time, Darrell stayed in the car. He followed Murk down the street, stopping from time to time and waving traffic around him. And when Murk turned into the same bar, Darrell drove to the corner and stopped, watching both entrances. When Murk did not emerge from either, Darrell parked the car, walked across the street, sat down in an outdoor cafe, and ordered coffee. Nobody was getting out of that bar whom he wouldn't see. 2.5 hours later, Murk emerged from the door he had entered and walked back toward his house. Darrell followed him all the way, watching as he let himself in the back door. 20 minutes later, one by one, all the lights in the house went off. Darrell settled in for the night watch. This is the end of side 3. At 2:30 a.m., the alarm went off, and Murk sat up in bed. He was hungover and sleepy, but he forced himself to get dressed. He was about to go out the front door when he remembered that he had been warned against being followed. With the lights still off, he peeped through the Venetian blinds in the living room and saw the car that had followed him earlier in the evening. It was strategically parked so as to cover both the front and rear entrances. Murk thought for a moment, then picked up the envelope in the end table, put it into his pocket, and went into the kitchen. He opened a window on the side of the house opposite the car and stepped out into the night, leaving the window open so that he could re-enter the same way. His motor scooter was in the garage with his car. He backed out the scooter and pushed it a block from the house before kicking the starter. Then he headed toward Stock Island. Near the end of the pontoons, not far from the entrance to the marina, he came to number 19, which was occupied by a small cabin cruiser. The cabin door was closed, and as he was about to knock on it, a familiar voice said, "Come in." Murk opened the door and stepped down into the cabin. At first it appeared that there was no one inside. Straight ahead of him was a table on which there were a small lamp providing the only light, a bottle of Myers rum, and a glass. Then Murk felt something cold and metallic on the back of his neck. "Sit down, Murk," the familiar voice said, "and have a drink." Murk was afraid for the first time, and he didn't move. "No need to be worried," the voice said. "After we've talked for a while, I'll sign the check, and you can go. Now sit down." Murk seated himself at the table, his back to his host. "Pour yourself a drink," the voice said. "A large one." Murk picked up the bottle of rum and poured a drink. "Fill the glass to the brim." Murk did as he was told. "Now drink it. Every drop. Get it down." Murk began to drink, and it was not as hard to swallow as he had feared. Murk took a deep breath and finished off the glass. "Now put the check on the table, and I'll sign it." Murk reached into his pocket, produced the envelope, and placed it on the cabin table. "Take it out of the envelope. The note, too." Murk did as he was told. Then something heavy smashed into the back of his neck, and he fell into unconsciousness. Darrell sipped coffee from his thermos and waited for Murk to leave the house for the tennis club. At 9:10, he began to wonder what was wrong. He checked the house and realized that Murk was gone. He picked up his phone and called Tommy. "What do you think?" "I'm afraid to think," Tommy said, "because I think I've made a big mistake. Meet me at the tennis club. Now." Later, in the car, Darrell asked, "What do you think?" "There are two possibilities," Tommy replied. "One, Claire and Murk have decamped together. Or two, Murk is the schmuck who thought he could have Claire, and he was wrong." "Have Claire again," Darrell said. "Yeah, again," Tommy said. They turned into Day Street in time to see the big Mercedes back out of the driveway, Claire at the wheel. "Drop back and tail her," Tommy said. "At least she's still here," Darrell replied. "Her bags may be in the trunk. Follow her." They followed the Mercedes out Roosevelt Boulevard, where it turned into the parking lot of Scotty's, a huge building supply home improvement store. They sat 100 yards away for half an hour, watched Claire get back into the Mercedes carrying a brown paper bag, then followed her back to Day Street. "Well, I'll be damned," Darrell said. "Probably." "Mobile 4, base," the radio barked. "Base, Mobile 4, Tommy replied. "Mobile 4, the Coast Guard has picked up a body out near the reef. White male, 6 feet, 170, brown hair, nude." Tommy sighed. "Let's go take a look at him," he said. 3 hours later, they found Chuck and Victor in the clubhouse. "Chuck, we need to talk to you and Victor separately. Darrell, you talk to Chuck. Victor, you come with me." Tommy led Victor outside and pointed at a courtside chair. "Sit," he said. "What's going on, Tommy?" "It's time you and I had a real serious talk, Victor." "Shoot. What time did you finish last night?" "At 6. What did you do then?" "I went home, showered, and changed clothes. Then I met Chuck and Meg at Louie's for dinner. We were celebrating our buying the club." "How late were you there?" "Well, now, that's where things get a little fuzzy," Victor said ruefully. "We sort of tied one on. Then we went to Chuck's boat." "How long were you there?" "All night." Tommy stared at the man. If his story held up, then the list of suspects was at an end. "How long have you known Claire Karras, Victor?" "Since they came to town, late last year, I guess." "Did you know Claire before that?" "No, you asked me all this before, Tommy." Tommy leaned forward. "You were in the Marines in Vietnam, right?" "Yep." "Victor, did the Marines teach you how to use a knife?" "Sure, they taught everybody." "Did you ever kill anybody with the knife?" Victor shook his head. "I never got that close to anybody I wanted to kill. Mostly I fired an M16 at Jungle." "Tommy, what's this all about?" "Murk's dead." Victor looked absolutely flabbergasted. When? How? Late last night. Drowning. Drowning? He was swimming late last night? Boating, Tommy said. He didn't do any swimming. Back in the car, Tommy and Victor compared notes. The three of them seemed to have spent most of the last 48 hours together, Darrell said. But Victor was sleeping in the saloon on the boat. He could have sneaked out in the night. Tommy nodded. But if he did, he's got Meg, who was pretty sober, to testify as to how drunk he was. Tommy, you predicted this. You said she had a man who was helping her. You said she'd waste him as soon as she nailed Chuck. Well, we nailed Chuck, she thinks, and she wasted him. It's obvious to me. Tommy sighed. I wish it were as obvious to me, kid. Tommy was awakened by the telephone before dawn. Tommy Scully, he said. Tommy, it's Rita, a small female voice said. Rita Cortez in L.A.? Oh, yeah, how are you? What is it, the middle of the night out there? It's a little after 2, she said. What's up, Rita? You're going to be very angry with me. Why should I be angry with you? I told them. Told who and what? About Key West, I told them. Start at the beginning, Rita, and tell me everything. These 2 guys showed up at my house, and they said they wanted to know everything about Barry's time in Florida. What's his name? The lawyer sent them? They didn't mention his name, but who else? What exactly did they ask you? They knew Barry had been to Florida because he was killed there, and they knew you were from Key West. What they didn't know was the tip that Barry got about Key West. But they know it now. Oh, Tommy managed to say. His mind was racing. They hurt me, Tommy. I wouldn't have told them, but they hurt me. I'm sorry, Rita. I wish I could have been there to help. Are you all right? I think they broke my arm. Oh, shit. Do you want me to get you some help there? I'll call somebody on the LAPD and get you some help. No, don't do that. They might still be around. And they swore they'd come back if I called the cops. But you need help. I can get myself to the emergency room. Mount Sinai isn't far from my place. Can you drive? I can make it. Don't worry about me. Worry about you. Me? Why? Because the lawyer knows you're from Key West, remember? They knew it, too. They're going to want to know what you know about Barry and Marinello and the Karras woman. Where did you hear that last name? Karras? They mention it. What do the 2 guys look like? Give me a description. One of them was sharp-looking, a slick dresser. I think it was an Armani suit. Dark hair, not too long, slicked back. A straight nose, good teeth. A ladies' man. The other was just a gorilla. Big, hairy, smelled of garlic, right out of a description, Rita. 6'3", 240, black hair going gray, thick hair on the backs of his hands. Oh, hair everywhere. Bad nose job. Okay, got it. You watch out, Tommy. They might show up there. I'll watch out, Rita. Now you get to the ER right away, you hear me? And call me if you need anything. And I mean anything. He hung up. An hour later, Tommy and Darrell stood in the arrivals lounge, such as it was, at Key West International Airport. The good thing about it was that every flight pulled up and emptied at the same gate. Heads up, Tommy said. Look-a here. There they were. The younger one still in his Armani suit, the gorilla in a sport shirt with the tails out, looking weary and grumpy. They were carrying overnight bags. The 2 men passed within inches of the detectives. Tommy watched as they headed for the rental car counter. The big one's renting the car. He's using cash. The younger guy's on the hotel reservation phone. Let's go get in the car. They went out to the car parked close to where the rental cars were. A few minutes later, the 2 hoods left the airport building, walked across the street, and got into a Lincoln town car. "If they booked a hotel room, they must not know where she lives," Tommy said. "Otherwise, they just go and do what they gotta do, then get out." "They're tired," Darrell said. "It was a long flight. Maybe they're going to wait until morning." "We're not going to babysit them all night, are we?" Tommy grinned. "We'll take turns, kid." Tommy walked through the hotel slowly, looking for the two men. He found them in the restaurant, tearing into large steaks. He ordered a club soda at the bar and watched them through the rest of their dinner. When they left the restaurant, Tommy showed his badge to the desk clerk. "I want a room for the night, preferably on the ground floor, and I'd like your very best rate." "For you, it's comped," the man said. "Anything to help out our mighty men on the force." "You're sweet," Tommy said, accepting a key. "Right down the hall there on your left. You can see the elevators if you peek through the little hole in the door. That's what you fellas do, isn't it? Peek through doors?" "All the time," Tommy replied. "Thanks." Darrell joined him later, and Tommy filled the younger man in. "Our two palookas left a 9 o'clock call. I left one for 8. Let's get some sleep and see where they lead us tomorrow." "Suits me," Darrell said. "I'm bushed." Claire Karras had just finished dressing the next morning when the doorbell rang. She opened the door to her bedroom and walked down the hall to the front door. A young man, rather handsome, dressed in a good Italian suit, stood at the door. He smiled. "Mrs. Karras?" "Yes." "My name is Parma. I was a business associate of your husband, kind of. Can I come in a minute? I'd like to use your phone if it's okay." "Sure," she said, unlatching the screen door. "Come upstairs," she said. "It's more comfortable." "Yeah," he said. "Comfortable is good." She reached the top of the stairs and turned, smiling, to show him to a sofa. She had not yet completed her turn and didn't see the backhand coming. There was a loud noise as he struck her below the right ear, and she spilled backward into the room, her thin cotton dress riding up over her thighs. She scrambled backward, trying to get to her feet, but he caught her with his open right hand, and she fell again. He walked toward her, then took hold of the coffee table between them, and, with a quick motion, sent it flying across the room. "What do you want?" she asked, and her voice was nearly uncontrollable. Then she looked toward the door and saw a man who frightened her even more. "Who is he?" she asked. "Oh, this is my associate, Mr. Bones. He got that name because he likes breaking them. He tells me it's something about the sound they make." "Please tell me what you want," she said. Parma reached into an inside pocket and retrieved a small kitchen knife. "I bought it this morning," he said, "just for you." He ran his thumb along the blade. "Razor sharp." "What do you want?" she pleaded. "It's like this, lady. I'm going to ask you some questions about your husband and his money, and if I don't get answers that please me a lot, I'm going to start using this cute little knife on your very pretty face." He threw the knife at the floor between them, and it stuck in the wide planking. "Your husband, back when his name was Marin, took some money from some people, didn't he?" "Yes, he told me he did." She had to draw this out as long as possible, until she could regain control of herself. "Did he tell you how much?" "Not exactly. He only hinted that there was a lot." She sat up, got her feet under her. "Well, let me mention a figure. $27 million. Does that have a familiar ring?" "More," she said. "He had more than that when he died." "Boy, that's good news," he said. "The people I work for are going to like that." "Where is the money?" "It's invested," she said. "Invested where? In what?" "I'll get the papers," she said, rising and starting toward the small desk a few paces away. She managed to take 3 steps, before he reacted and started for her. She got the drawer open and whipped around, pointing the automatic at his head. He stopped moving, realizing he had made a big mistake. He backed up a step. "Now, listen, lady, that's going to hurt more than it's going to help. Give it to me." He held out a hand. "Unlike me, it's not even cocked." Quickly, she worked the action and got off a round at his head. It caught him in the throat, and he staggered backward, wide-eyed. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw the big man coming at her. She whipped around, assumed a firing stance, and put 2 rounds into his chest, knocking him off his feet. When she was sure he couldn't get at her, she turned her attention once more to Parma, who was still standing, clutching at his throat with both hands. He was vainly trying to stem the spurting blood which had soaked the front of his suit and was gathering in a large pool at his feet. She took a step toward him, the pistol held out at arm's length. He tried to speak, but couldn't. Instead, he shook his head, spraying blood around him. She lowered the pistol and put a round into his crotch. He staggered backward, knocked over a table, and fell face down, twitching. Then, before she could relax, another man appeared in the living room door. Claire spun and fired 2 rounds in his direction. He dove to the floor, his hands held out in front of him. "Claire, don't! It's Tommy Scully!" The younger cop appeared behind Tommy, aiming a pistol at her. "Drop it, Mrs. Karras. Drop it or I'll fire!" Claire dropped the pistol and fainted. Tommy laid her on a sofa and slapped her cheeks lightly. "Darryl, get me some water." "Oh, and you can call an ambulance and a crime scene team." Darryl brought the water. "No need for an ambulance. They're both dead." "Too bad," Tommy said. "I would have liked to talk to them." "Better call the M.E." Darryl went to the phone and started making calls. Tommy gave Claire Karras some water, then took the glass, set it down, grabbed her under her armpits, and sat her up straight on the sofa. He wanted to ask his questions before she had had time to recover her composure. "All right, Claire, listen to me. I want to know exactly what happened, and I want to know before anybody else arrives. It's going to be a madhouse around here in a couple of minutes, and if I'm going to help you, I'm going to need to know it all right now." "It's all so strange," she said, breathing deeply. "A man, the younger one, appeared at my door and said he was a friend of Harry's. He asked to use the phone, and I let him in. He forced me up here and started hitting me. Then the other one showed up." "Did either of them mention the name Marinello or Marin?" "No, I've never heard either of those names." "Then why do you think these men were here?" "They said they wanted money. They must have read something in the papers about Harry. Heard he was rich." She was too good for him, this one. She was going to stick to that story, and nobody but he was going to question it, and there was nothing he could do about it. Tommy waited until late that night before making 2 phone calls. He found the home telephone number of Barton Whitfield, the Los Angeles lawyer, and dialed it. He figured it would be about dinner time in L.A. "Hello? Mr. Whitfield?" "Yes?" "This is Detective Scully of the Key West Police Department. Do you remember me? You and I and Rita Cortez had a meeting a while back." Yes, I remember you. I told you I'd let you know if I learned anything else about the Marin Marinello incident." "Yes. What have you learned?" "I've learned all sorts of things about you and your business connections," Tommy said. "And I've turned over what I know to the Organized Crime Division of the Los Angeles Police Department." "What?" This was a lie, but he wanted to make the man sweat. "I expect you'll be hearing from them in due course," Tommy said. "You'll be hearing from me again in due course, too." "What do you mean by that?" "When you put your 2 thugs under Rita Cortez, you made a very big mistake, Mr. Whitfield, if that is your name. You made an even bigger mistake when you let them hurt her. I'm going to see that you pay for that." "Detective, this conversation is over," Whitfield sputtered. He had one more call to make. Hello? It's Tommy Scully, Claire. My lawyer says I'm not to talk to you, she said. You don't have to say a word. Just listen. All right, I'm listening. I know what happened at your house this morning, and I know why it happened. I know that you murdered Harry and that you had help. I know you're responsible somehow for your ex-husband's death, too. Can you prove any of this? She asked. I don't have to. Not anymore. When you killed Harry, Claire, you grabbed a tiger by the tail, and you can't let go now. The people Harry stole the money from know he's dead, and they know you've got the money. And, as I think was demonstrated this morning, they know exactly where to find you. Now you can only do two things. You can run, and if you do, I'll be on you like a pack of bloodhounds. Or you can come in from the cold and try to cut a deal. I'll work with you on that, Claire. It's your last best chance, believe me. You're not Harry, remember. You don't know how to disappear and make money disappear. Without Merck's help, you're alone now, and you're in way over your head. I've already seen to it that the dead men's friends in L.A. know what happened. All I have to do now is wait. You got that? There was a brief silence. Then Claire hung up. Tommy called Darrell on his portable. Hey, he said. What's up? She knows the worst now. She'll probably bolt. You stick to her, you hear? Like a limpet. Good, kid. See you in the morning. Claire Karras moved at a little after 6 a.m. Darrell sat straight up in his car and watched her open the trunk to the Mercedes and toss in a small piece of luggage, then get into the car and back out of the driveway. She turned onto Roosevelt Boulevard and headed toward the end of the island and US 1. But to his surprise, she turned into a large shopping center and went into an all-night supermarket. 20 minutes passed. Then Claire came out of the market pushing a shopping cart laden with grocery bags. She sped out of the parking lot, leaving Darrell behind. Darrell was abreast of the Key West Yacht Club, moving fast when he caught sight of the Mercedes out of the corner of his eye, parked behind the yacht club. He managed a left turn into the yacht club parking lot and screeched to a halt behind the car. Then he looked up and saw a small cabin cruiser 200 yards away, making a right turn out of Garrison Bight toward the open sea. Claire Karras was at the wheel. Oh, my God, he moaned. He grabbed for his phone and dialed Tommy. Yeah? A sleepy voice. Hit the deck, Tommy. She's on the move. Where? She had a boat we didn't know about, and right now she's headed toward the western end of the island. She'll go right past Key West Bight, and then she could go anywhere. We want to follow her if we can, not bust her. Not yet, anyway. Here's what you do. Darrell listened to the instructions. Right, he said. Chuck was sleeping soundly when suddenly there was a loud thump aft, and Choke rocked in the water. What was that? Meg said sleepily. Somebody on the afterdeck, Chuck replied, sitting up on an elbow. Now whoever it was banging on the hatchway and shouting something. He got the hatch open, and Darrell Haynes spilled into the boat. Chuck, sorry to wake you, Darrell panted, but Claire Karras is on the run, and Tommy said for you to get your engines started and get ready to let go your lines. He's on his way. What do you mean she's on the run? Chuck asked. Just do it. Tommy will explain when he gets here. Just as Chuck got the gangplank stowed, Tommy appeared on the run and leaped aboard. Chuck brought in the stern lines and went to the pilot's seat. In a moment they were free of their mooring and headed toward the little harbor's entrance. Claire is running, Tommy said. From what? Chuck asked. From me. In what? Tommy turned to his partner. In what, Darrell? In a little cabin cruiser, maybe 22 feet. Outboard engine, looked about 40 horsepower from the size of it. Color? Wide. Swell, everything's white around here. It has a light blue cabin top. We gotta find her, Tommy said quietly, almost to himself. If she gives us the slip now, she's gone forever. You can believe that. Chuck handed his binoculars to Darrell. "Use these," he said. "She can go one of 3 ways. Straight ahead up to Sand Key where the channel runs through the reef, left and up the east side of the Keys or to the Bahamas, or to the right." "What's to the right?" Tommy asked. "I'm new here." "A bunch of small, uninhabited islands with various names. Then the Marquesas, which are another bunch of uninhabited islands with shallow water all around. And finally, about 70, 80 miles out, the Dry Tortugas." "There she is," Darrell yelled, pointing west. "I can just barely see her in the distance." Meg brought up coffee on a tray, and everybody had some. Chuck kept an eye on the speck in the distance that was their prey. "You want me to try and close in on her? She seems to be doing about 20 knots, and Choke can do 30 on a good day." "No, just keep her in sight," Tommy replied. 2 hours passed with Choke keeping pace with the little cruiser. Tommy looked at his watch. "I didn't think we'd be going this far," he said. "I think we better ask the Coast Guard for some surveillance, just in case." Chuck pointed to an empty hole in the instrument panel. "Sorry, my VHF radio's in the shop." "Swell." Tommy pulled out his pistol and checked it. "1 clip," he said to Darrell. "How about you?" "The same." "Chuck, you still got that shotgun aboard?" "Yeah." "How much ammo you got?" 4 rounds, and it's birdshot." "Swell," Tommy said. "You think we're going to get into a shooting war?" "She's going somewhere," Tommy said. "And if she's alone, she's meeting somebody, and you can bet she's got that 9mm automatic with her, the one she used yesterday." An hour later, the boat was no more than a speck on their quarter. "Now," Tommy said, "come around and run toward her, but keep this distance. Let your speed match hers." "Aye, aye, sir," Chuck said. "How's our fuel?" Tommy asked. Chuck looked at the gauges. "Yeah, we still got more than half tanks, and at this speed we're running very efficiently." He turned back to the chart, and his eyes widened slightly. Tommy turned and looked at him. "What's the matter, Chuck?" "I think I know where Claire is going," he said. Tommy looked at the chart. "Okay, I give up. Where's she going?" "The wreck," Chuck said. "The one where Harry died." He circled a part of the chart with his finger. "It's around there somewhere, outside the reef." The sun dropped into the sea. "No lights," Tommy said. "If we come up on her, I don't want her to see us first." "Tommy," Chuck said softly, "what are we going to do if we catch up to her? Arrest her?" "I don't have a charge," Tommy said, "but I could take her in for questioning, I guess." "We're well outside the 12-mile limit. You don't have jurisdiction, do you?" "We'll call it a hot pursuit." Chuck pulled the engines back to idle and switched off the ignition. "What?" Tommy asked. Chuck pointed ahead at the light. "It just came on." "How far?" "Hard to judge distance at night, but the horizon's only 2-3 miles away, so she's closer than that. Maybe only a mile, mile and a half." "Why'd you cut your engines?" "There's no wind, and sound carries great distances over water." "Listen," Tommy said. "Do you hear it?" Chuck stuck his head outside the windshield. "Music." "Latin," Darrell said. "Maybe they're dancing," Tommy replied. "How do we know it's Claire?" Darrell asked. "We don't," Tommy replied. "But right now the light is all we've got. Let's find out who it is." Slowly, inexorably, Choke drifted downstream toward the light. Chuck raised the binoculars every 10 or 15 seconds, trying to make out the shape of the vessel. "Listen," Tommy whispered. "They're talking." Chuck listened, and he heard laughter. "Sounds like a woman and a man." "Keep your voices down," Tommy whispered to everybody. "If we can hear them, they can hear us." They were 40 feet from the big motor yacht, then 30. 3 pairs of outstretched hands made contact with the white hull of the motor yacht, and Choke came to rest alongside her starboard bow without a sound. The music was quite loud now, but there were no longer any voices to be heard. Tommy stepped lightly back into Choke's cockpit, retrieved Chuck's shotgun, and went back to the ladder. Silently, he laid the shotgun on the deck of the larger yacht, put a foot on the bottom rung of the boarding ladder, and started up, followed by Darrell. Tommy got a leg over the side and hauled himself into the cockpit. He could see two figures in the saloon through the misted glass doors. Darrell came on board and brought the shotgun into the cockpit with him. Tommy leaned close to him and whispered, "I don't think you'll need the shotgun. There are only two of them." Darrell quietly laid the shotgun on a cockpit cushion and drew his pistol. Tommy drew his pistol and motioned to Darrell to follow. He tiptoed to the sliding saloon doors, pushed them back, and stepped into the main saloon. A man and a woman stood in the middle of the cabin, locked in an embrace. "Good evening," Tommy said, and as the two turned to face him, his mouth dropped open. "Well, look at this, Darrell," he said. "Look who we got here." Tommy was grinning from ear to ear. "Hello, Claire," he said. "Hello, Victor." The two let each other go. "Well, I'll be goddamned," Darrell said. "Victor is the schmuck?" "Victor's the biggest schmuck you ever saw," Tommy said. "Tell Chuck and Meg they can come aboard." Darrell stepped into the cockpit. "Chuck, Meg, come aboard. You're not going to believe it." A moment later, Chuck and Meg came into the saloon. "Jesus, Victor," Chuck said. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Just making my way in the world, pal." "So now all is revealed," Tommy said. "Wait a minute, Tommy," Chuck said. "Will you please tell me what's going on here?" "What's going on is that all along, Victor has been helping Claire do her dirty work. In fact, he's probably been doing it for her." "Victor killed Harry?" "That's right, with more than a little assistance from Claire. He also knifed a man named Barry Carmen, I don't believe you knew him, up near Miami. And he killed poor old Merc." Chuck stared at Tommy. "Merc's dead?" "That's right. Victor snuck off your boat a few nights ago, met Merc, slugged him, then drove him out to the reef and dumped him to drown. Nice guy, huh?" Victor said nothing. Chuck turned to face his new partner. "Victor, why?" "For Claire," Tommy explained. "He did it all for Claire. And Harry's ill-got money, of course." Victor shrugged. "I'm getting old," he said. "So are you, Chuck, for that matter. But unlike you, I didn't want to end my days teaching tennis in the hot sun." Darrell turned Victor around, stuck the gun next to his spine, searched him thoroughly, and sat him down. Tommy's eyes had never left Claire. "Claire," he said, "you turn off the music and be very careful how you do it. If you have any ideas about going into that handbag next to the stereo, please remember that I'm not some jerk from L.A., and that I'll kill you where you stand." Claire walked to an elaborate entertainment center and turned off the music, then went and sat by Victor. "Chuck, you and Meg have a seat at the bar." Chuck took Meg's hand, and they settled themselves on bar stools. There was a fifth of rum resting on the bar, and Chuck looked as if he wanted some of it. Tommy frowned and turned to Darrell. "Darrell, with the music off, do you hear water dripping? Is it raining?" Another man's voice came from behind them. "It's not raining, Tommy." Then there was the sound of a shotgun being pumped. "Let your guns drop at your sides and put your hands on top of your heads." Tommy did as he was told, then turned around. "Harry?" he said weakly. Harry Karras was standing in the cockpit, dripping wet, wearing a wetsuit. His hair was blonde, and he had a full beard. There was a large plastic cooler at his feet, sealed with tape, and Chuck's shotgun was in his hands. Victor got up, retrieved the detective's pistols, stuck them into his belt, and stood at the end of the bar next to Chuck. "Now, Tommy," Harry said, "you and your partner sit down on the deck, right where you are." The two detectives sat down. Tommy turned to Darrell. "I was wrong. Victor isn't the schmuck. I am." Harry smiled. "Don't be too hard on yourself, Tommy. You weren't meant to figure it out." "No," Tommy said. "I was meant to nail Chuck for murdering you so you could be dead and Claire could disappear. By the way, Chuck, it was Victor who put the incriminating plastic hose in your car, and I thought it was Merc. What happens now, Harry?" "I'll get to that in a minute, Tommy. Chuck, that beautiful little boat of yours runs on gasoline, doesn't it?" Chuck nodded slowly. "Victor, let's put your skills to work. Go aboard Chuck's boat and see if you can cause a lot of gasoline to leak into the bilges." Victor left the saloon without a word. "Harry," Tommy said, "while Victor's doing his dirty work, you mind answering a few questions?" "Why not? My answers aren't going anywhere." "Let's start with L.A. You are Marinello, aren't you?" "I used to be, Tommy, but not anymore. I'm not even Harry Karras anymore. Claire and I have brand new, quite genuine passports and a whole identity package to go with them." "Let me give you a tip, Harry. This time, make yourself a credit record." "If you'd had a credit record when I checked, I might never have gotten near you." "That's very good advice, Tommy. I'll put somebody to work on that. Did I make any other mistakes?" "Yeah, but you first," Tommy said. "What's in the cooler?" He pointed to the cockpit. $22 million in bearer bonds, gold certificates, and other negotiable instruments," Harry said. "It was all on the wreck?" "That's right. You see, although I had a sizable sum in other, more visible investments, that was just to allow us to live well on the income while we were planning our final escape. I didn't want all the rest of it lying around the house." Chuck spoke up. "Harry, I have a question, too. Why aren't you dead? You look dead to me, lying down there on the deck of the wreck with a tank full of carbon monoxide and blood in your mask." Harry smiled. "I was pretty convincing, huh?" "You certainly were. How did you do it?" "I had a little cylinder of clean air, just enough to get me to the wreck without breathing the noxious fumes." "But how did you get off the wreck and here?" "I had a rebreather kit which leaves no bubbles stashed in a locker on the wreck," Harry explained. "When you popped up, I swam to the locker, started breathing oxygen, and got out of there." "But you were an awfully long time with no air, weren't you? I mean, from the time I found you down there until I popped up." "Less than 2 minutes. I can hold my breath for a little over 3. It's a gift, like being able to run fast or jump high." "Where did you go after that? There were no boats around that I could see." "No, but there's a little island to the northwest about 2.5 miles. "You swam 2.5 miles underwater?" Chuck asked incredulously. "Partly. The last hour was on the surface. The Coast Guard had gone by then. I began swimming at 6. I would have made the Olympics, but my personal sponsors didn't want me to become famous before I started practicing law. The trip took me nearly 3 hours against the current, but then it had to be far enough that nobody would believe I could make it." Victor came back on board. "There's about a half a gallon a minute leaking into their bilges now," he said. "I didn't want to make it too big in case anybody ever inspects the wreck. There'd be enough for a big explosion in a few minutes." He didn't look happy about it. "I get the picture," Tommy said. You take us out, put us aboard choke, and then there's a terrible accident? You're very quick, Tommy. We're pretty far out from Key West, and I doubt if anyone will even see the explosion. I see, Tommy said. Let's get back to your mistakes, Harry. You asked me if you made any more. By all means, Harry said. I want to hear this. It's kind of a daisy chain of mistakes, Tommy said. You trusted Claire, Claire trusted Victor, Victor trusted Claire. What do you mean? Haven't you wondered how the mob found Claire? Harry frowned. It was that detective, Carmen. Yeah, but Carmen was tipped. Claire tipped him. Harry glanced at Claire. Substantiate that. Carmen told me he got a telephone call from what sounded like a young woman. Who but Claire? Who else knew? That doesn't make any sense, Tommy. If they'd found me, they would have found her. Tommy was shaking his head. The tip was before you faked your death. Claire was depending on your mob buddies to take you out so she'd be free to disappear with the money. But you solved her problem with your plan to die. She did know where the money was, didn't she, Harry? Harry looked appraisingly at Claire. You have a rebuttal, sweetheart? He's crazy, Harry. I want to be with you. Tommy turned to Claire. I'll bet that's not what you told Victor. He turned to the tennis pro. By the way, Victor, Harry and Claire have brand-new passports and ID. Do you have a brand-new passport? Victor looked at Claire. No. Victor, I have another question for you. When did you find out that Harry was alive? The day before yesterday, Victor said. Must have come as quite a shock, Tommy said. And Harry, you've known about Victor all along, right? Oh, yes. He looked thoughtful. Well, nearly all along. Ah, Tommy said, looking thoughtful. So Claire has lied to both of you. You know, it strikes me that as soon as Chuck, Meg, Darryl, and I are out of the picture, somebody else is going to go. He turned to Claire. Tell me, have you figured out which one is next? I mean, you need one of them to get out of here in this boat, but not both. Three's kind of a crowd, isn't it? And I doubt if two would be company for very long. Harry turned toward Claire. My dear, would you like to respond to that? No, she said, getting to her feet. I don't think I would. She started across the saloon toward her purse next to the stereo. What I'd like is some aspirin. She reached into the handbag. Suddenly there were guns everywhere. Claire's hand came out of the purse with an automatic in it. Victor clawed at his belt where Tommy's and Darryl's guns were, and Harry had to make a choice. Harry and Claire fired simultaneously. Harry staggered backward into the cockpit as Claire received a load of birdshot in the face and went down. Victor didn't seem to know what to do, and while he was thinking about it, Chuck used the moment to swing a bottle of rum at the back of his head. Then it was very quiet. No one moved, except Claire. Bleeding, blinded, she raised herself on one elbow and began firing wildly. She got off half a clip before Chuck's dive ended on top of her. By the time he twisted the pistol from her grip, she had died. Darryl, Tommy said, getting up, check on Harry, and be careful. He produced a pair of handcuffs and snapped them onto Victor's wrists. Chuck, you go and stop the gas leak on your boat and pump out the bilges. Good idea. Meg, please find a bar towel and apply it to Victor's head. We don't want him to bleed to death before we get him back to Key West. He'll be useful in explaining what happened here. Darryl came in from the cockpit. Harris bought it. Claire was a good shot with a handgun, wasn't she? She was some piece of work, Tommy said. He walked behind the bar and started looking at bottles. "I believe I need a drink," he said. "Will anybody join me?" While Darrell applied first aid to Victor's scalp in the saloon, Tommy, Chuck, and Meg sat in the cockpit of the big yacht, sipping rum and tonic and watching the Coast Guard cutter coming toward them. "Tommy," Chuck said, "you know what surprises me most in all this? Victor. I wouldn't have believed him capable of any of this. Victor's a sociopath," Tommy said. "He's a charmer, but he's one of those people who is completely without a conscience. I think Claire must have seen that in him. Remember, she dangled the bait in front of you, briefly, but you didn't take it. That's when she picked Victor. She knew the difference between the two of you." Chuck shrugged. "If it hadn't been for you, Tommy, her plan would have worked. I'd have been a goner." "Chuck," Tommy said, "if it hadn't been for you tonight, we'd all have been goners. Victor wouldn't have left anybody alive. You should always remember, when the pressure was on, when you had to come through, you didn't choke." The three of them finished their drinks and got up to meet the Coast Guard.